Imagine two books sitting next to each other on a shelf.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And the text inside these books is completely identical. I mean, word for word, page for page, it is the exact same story.
Right, so the exact same product.
Exactly. But the first book sells absolutely 0 copies. I mean, nobody wants it. It just collects dust.
Yikes, okay.
Yeah. But then the publisher takes that exact same books, changes a few words on the cover, puts the manuscript right back on the shelves, and suddenly it sells 30,000 copies overnight.
Wow. And the product didn't change at all.
The product didn't change, the price didn't change. But that second cover tapped into like a biological cheat code that physically forced the human brain to care.
That is fascinating.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting for our listeners. Most business communication completely fails because it fundamentally misunderstands what human beings actually care about.
Oh, absolutely.
We think we know what drives people to open an email or, click a link or buy a product, but we are usually dead wrong.
Yeah, we really are. And that tension between what we think people want and what their biology actually demands, well, that's the core of today's deep dive.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. We are exploring the foundational principles laid out in the introduction and chapter 1 of this legendary manual on ad agency psychology.
So what are we actually getting into today?
You're about to learn the exact biological drives, like drives that are literally hardwired into the neural architecture of every single human brain that dictate purchasing decisions.
So we're not just talking about like marketing tricks.
No, not at all. We are looking at the psychology of persuasion, not as some abstract art form, but as a predictable, mechanical function of human nature.
And honestly, whether you are an entrepreneur trying to scale a business or a freelancer pitching clients, or even just someone trying to persuade your boss to adopt a new idea, understanding these primal desires is the ultimate shortcut to getting people to take action.
It really is. It changes everything about how you communicate.
So today's mission is to unpack the psychological framework that turns casual observers into eager participants. We're going to explore why we buy, how our brains process desires, and how to communicate value in a way that the human operating system simply cannot ignore.
I love that phrase, the human operating system. But to even begin grasping this framework, we have to undergo a pretty massive fundamental mindset shift.
Okay, where do we start?
Well, the source text illustrates this requirement with this classic story about a Zen master and a visiting reporter. Have you heard this one?
I'm not sure. How does it go?
So this reporter travels all the way to Tibet to interview this wise old master, right? They sit down for tea. But instead of asking questions and, actually listening, the reporter just starts bragging.
Oh, one of those guys.
Exactly. He talks over the master, rambling on and on about all the philosophical texts he's read, his worldly travels, and everything he believes he already knows about life.
So he's just completely filling the air in the room, totally projecting his own ego.
Yes. And while the reporter is endlessly babbling, the Zen master quietly picks up the teapot and starts pouring.
Okay.
The hot tea rises to the rim of the cup, and the master just keeps pouring.
Wait, he just lets it overflow.
Just let's go. The tea spills all over the table, pooling onto the floor, soaking the reporter's shoes.
Oh, man.
Finally, the reporter stops talking, jumps back, and yells, "What are you doing? You can't pour in anymore. The cup is overflowing."
Right.
And the wise master looks at him calmly and says, "Yes, this teacup, like your mind, is so full of your own ideas that there is no room for new information. You must first empty your head before any new knowledge can enter."
Okay, let's unpack this, because in the context of business or marketing or even just everyday communication, that overflowing teacup represents all the preconceived notions we carry around, doesn't it?
It represents everything we think we know about being persuasive.
Yeah, it's that assumption that our marketing needs to be incredibly clever, or that we need to use witty puns, or that our website should look like some highly abstract conceptual art piece.
That is the perfect modern equivalent. I mean, most creators and business owners approach their audience with a completely overflowing teacup.
They want to show off.
Exactly. They want to be praised for their aesthetic vision. They want their peers to think they're sophisticated. But to actually understand consumer psychology, you have to completely empty your head of those vanity metrics.
You have to let go of the ego.
Right, before you can learn what realistically makes a consumer pull out their wallet.
Wait, I have to stop you there and push back a little bit on that.
Sure, go ahead.
Shouldn't ads be entertaining, though? I mean, isn't the goal of a great campaign to be memorable?
What?
Because when I think of the most famous commercials, especially the ones during the Super Bowl, I think of the ones that make me laugh out loud. or the ones with a great punchline or a celebrity cameo. Doesn't that creativity have intrinsic value?
Okay, let's examine the actual function of those commercials, because the myth of the entertaining ad is the very first thing we need to empty from the teacup. Yes, advertising is not journalism, and it is certainly not a stand-up comedy special.
Right.
Journalism's job is to report, inform, and entertain. You don't need the reader of a news article to take a specific, measurable action for that article to be considered successful.
That makes sense. You just consume it.
Exactly. But commercial communication has one sole purpose, and that is to get people to act.
To buy something.
To get them to whip out their credit card, click the PayPal button, or sign a legally binding contract.
Okay, I see the distinction.
The text actually quotes this advertising pioneer, Walter Weir. He was asked why most advertising is so incredibly lousy, even when it comes from giant corporations with massive budgets.
What did he say?
His response was brutally honest. He said, they simply don't know any better.
Wow. So they are just playing the wrong game entirely.
Exactly.
They think their job is to be the court jester, when their actual job is to be the royal persuader.
That is a great way to put it. And the legendary David Ogilvy took that sentiment even further.
What was his take?
He stated that 99% of advertising doesn't sell much of anything. It's just noise.
Wait, hold on. 99%.
That's what he said.
That sounds like a massive exaggeration from a guy who's just trying to sell his own agency's particular methodology. I mean, if 99% of ads literally didn't work, these billion-dollar companies would have stopped funding them decades ago.
Oh.
How can that statistic possibly be grounded in reality?
I know it sounds super hyperbolic until we look at the metric Ogilvy is actually using here.
Okay, what metric is that?
He isn't saying that 99% of ads aren't seen or that they don't generate, brand awareness.
Which is a notoriously fuzzy metric anyway.
Extremely fuzzy. No, he is saying that 99% of ads fail to draw a direct, measurable line to a sale.
Oh, okay.
If a company spends $5 million on a highly creative, critically acclaimed, award-winning television spot, and everyone in the country laughs at the joke.
But nobody actually buys the product.
Right. If sales remain completely flat the following quarter, the ad failed. It succeeded as entertainment, but it failed as advertising.
So the practical takeaway for you, the listener, is to stop trying to entertain your audience just for the sake of your own ego.
Exactly. Every single piece of communication you craft must be measured by one ruthless metric. Does it drive the listener to take the desired action?
If they chuckle, but they don't buy, your communication broke down.
Precisely.
But, this raises an important question, though. When we shift the goalpost from entertaining to persuading, a lot of people suddenly get very uneasy.
Oh, for sure.
I think the moment you start using words like influence or persuasion mechanics, people feel a bit slimy.
They do. They feel like they're being manipulative.
Yeah. You hear small business owners say things like, oh, I don't want to influence anyone. I don't want to manipulate my customers. I just want to put my amazing product out there and inform the public. I want to let the product speak for itself.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And the source material addresses that exact sentiment and basically calls it absolute hogwash.
Really? Hogwash.
Total hogwash. The desire to just inform is a defense mechanism. It's used to avoid the responsibility of actually selling.
How so?
Well, if you truly just wanted to inform the public, your advertising would look utterly alien to us. Imagine you own a local pizza shop, right?
Okay, Giuseppe's Pizza.
Right. If your only goal was pure information, your ad would read exactly like this. Giuseppe sells pizza. $9.99. 123 Mozzarella Road.
That's it?
That's it. You would include no pictures, no adjectives, no mention of melted cheese or a family recipe passed down from Naples or the satisfying crunch of the crust, just raw, naked data.
And nobody does that.
Exactly.
Because deep down, Giuseppe doesn't want you to just theoretically know that he operates a business. He wants to trigger a physiological response. He wants you to salivate.
Right. And to take that a step further, you don't run a raw data ad because you don't actually want the prospect to make up their own mind in a vacuum.
You don't?
No, you want to make their mind up for them. You want to dictate how they feel about the pizza before they even taste it.
Oh, wow. That's a strong way to put it.
It's true, though. The text uses a brilliant analogy about walking into a high-end car dealership to illustrate how this plays out in person.
Let's explore that car dealership reality, because I think it perfectly strips away the illusion of just informing.
Okay, picture yourself walking into a luxury dealership. You are looking at the flawless, shiny paint reflecting the showroom lights. You're breathing in that distinct aromatic leather upholstery smell.
Oh yeah, that new car smell.
Exactly. You are staring at a massive 550 horsepower engine block, and then a salesperson approaches you with a warm smile, and you start chatting.
Just a casual chat.
Right. You might convince yourself that you are just having a friendly, everyday conversation about automotive engineering, but you are not.
You're really not.
That salesperson is executing a masterclass in psychological communication strategies.
They are reading your body language while you are completely distracted by the new car smell.
Absolutely.
They're figuring out if you want to feel powerful or safe or rich.
They are pulling you through a series of highly calculated, deliciously persuasive steps. It is a psychological dance.
So they're adjusting based on what you focus on.
Exactly. If you express concern about safety, they pivot to crash test ratings. If your eyes linger on the rims, they pivot to status and performance. Their goal isn't to be your friend.
Right.
And it's certainly not to casually pass the afternoon. Their sole, unwavering objective is to guide you to a desk and get a legally binding contract signed.
So what does this all mean for us? Because if our goal as communicators is to essentially pull people through a psychological maze until they bend to our will and sign a contract, aren't we just manipulating people?
That's the fear, isn't it?
Yeah. How do we separate this highly calculated psychological dance from being a con artist?
That is a vital moral distinction,
Yeah.
and it's one that David Ogilvy clarified beautifully.
What did he say about it?
He argued that advertising is only evil when it advertises evil things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. If you have a genuinely quality product, like something that truly solves a painful problem or brings immense joy or saves time, then persuasion is simply the necessary tool to help add satisfaction to your customer's life.
So it's about the quality of the end result for the user.
Exactly. Humans are naturally hesitant and resistant to change, even when that change is good for them. Persuasion helps them get out of their own way to acquire something that will ultimately benefit them.
But what if the line blurs? What if your product is just mediocre?
Well, if your product is crummy, if it breaks a week after they buy it, or if it fails to deliver on its promise, then you don't need a textbook on consumer psychology. You need a shot of ethics.
A shot of ethics. I like that.
Persuasion is merely an amplifier. It amplifies the reach and the impact of what you are offering. If the product is excellent, persuasion is a public service.
And if the product is garbage, persuasion is a scam.
Exactly. Assuming you sell something of actual value, you have a moral obligation to get over your fear of being persuasive.
Wow, that reframes it completely. If you hold a cure for a disease, it is immoral to whisper about it. You have to shout it from the rooftops.
Precisely.
Okay, so assuming we have a great product, how do we actually do this? If we empty our teacup of the idea that we need to be cute or purely entertaining, what fundamental truth do we replace it with?
We replace it with the harsh reality of human nature. And this is a reality that was brought to light by a man named Daniel Starch.
Daniel Starch. Who was he?
He was born in 1883, and Starch was an absolute pioneer in marketing psychology.
Okay.
Back in the 1930s, he started publishing reports that essentially told the biggest, wealthiest ad men in the country that they were flushing their clients' money down the toilet.
Oh, man. I can imagine the Madison Avenue executives of the 1930s did not appreciate being told they were incompetent by a psychologist.
Oh, they were completely baffled and deeply offended.
I bet.
They would point to their campaigns and say, but our ads are marvelous. Look at this full-page spread. We show our massive smoke-belching factories.
Smoke-belching factories. That was a selling point.
It was. They would boast, we have hundreds of thousands of square feet of warehouse space. We use unusual dramatic camera angles to show off our cutting-edge manufacturing equipment.
So they were basically just showing off their toys.
Exactly. They were overwhelmingly proud of their infrastructure. They thought the sheer scale of their operations would awe the consumer into buying.
And Starch basically drops a bomb on their entire worldview.
He really did.
He delivers this earth-shattering reality check, which is that people do not give a damn about your smoke-belching factory.
Not one bit. He told them that consumers do not care about your staff size, they do not care about your square footage, they do not care about the unusual camera angles highlighting your fancy equipment.
Right.
Starch revealed that human beings fundamentally only care about themselves.
It's like going on a first date, sitting down at a really nice restaurant, and spending 2 solid hours reading your own resume across the table.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You were talking about your bachelor's degree, the square footage of your office, and your quarterly performance metrics, instead of asking your date a single question about their dreams, their fears, or what they care about.
It's all...
You think you are impressing them, but you are completely missing the mark. You're just talking to yourself, and there definitely won't be a second date.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The ad men were ego casting instead of connecting.
Ego casting.
Yeah. Consumers only care about what the product will do for them. How will this item make their lives better, happier, easier, or more fulfilled?
Right.
The advertisers were making the communication entirely about the company's achievements when it desperately needed to be entirely about the consumer's internal life.
That makes so much sense.
And this concept was heavily echoed in a famous 1935 article by H.E. Warren called How to Understand Why People Buy.
Let's dig into Warren's perspective. What was his contribution to this shift?
Warren argued that to succeed in any commercial endeavor, we have to truly understand the depths of human nature. We have to strip away the superficial layers and distinguish between what people merely need and what they desperately want.
Needs versus want.
Exactly. We then have to apply proven commercial psychology to bridge the gap between those two things. We have to stop showing them the factory floor and start showing them a mirror reflecting their own desires.
Which brings us to the absolute core of this deep dive. If we need to hold up a mirror to the consumer's desires, we need to know exactly what those desires are.
Yes, we do.
And the source text provides the definitive blueprint for this. We are talking about the Life Force 8, commonly referred to as the LF8. These are the biological cheat codes of the human animal.
The Life Force 8 represents the transition from abstract communication theory to hard, actionable biology.
Okay, lay it on us.
The text makes a staggering claim here. These 8 biologically programmed desires are responsible for more sales, more conversions, and more human action than all other human wants combined.
Wait, combined? All other wants combined?
Yes. These aren't just polite preferences or passing interests. These are ancient survival mechanisms.
I want to go through every single one of these deeply, because this is the operating system of the human brain. Let's start with number 1.
Okay, number 1 is the desire for survival, enjoyment of life, and life extension. This is the absolute bedrock of our biology. The fear of death and the desire to prolong a vibrant life dictate an enormous amount of our behavior.
Right. It completely explains the multi-billion-dollar supplement industry.
Oh, absolutely.
And it explains why car commercials focus so heavily on automatic braking systems and crash test dummies. They aren't selling a piece of metal. They are selling the continuation of your existence.
That's exactly it. Moving to number 2, the enjoyment of food and beverages.
Okay.
This is tied directly to the evolutionary biology of calorie seeking. In our ancestral environment, finding high-calorie food was a matter of life and death.
Right. We needed it to survive.
So when you see a high-definition, slow-motion shot of a perfectly grilled burger with melted cheese dripping down the side, your brain isn't just analyzing an image. It is preparing your body to digest calories.
Right. You literally start salivating. The ad has bypassed your rational brain completely and triggered a glandular response.
Exactly.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is freedom from fear, pain, and danger. We are hardwired to avoid things that cause us physical or emotional distress.
This has to be huge for the insurance industry or home security system.
No, because it's their bread and butter.
When an alarm company shows a shadowy figure trying to pick a lock while a family sleeps upstairs, they are hitting that fear and danger button so hard that the consumer almost has no choice but to buy the system, just to relieve the anxiety the ad just created.
That's precisely how it works. Okay, number 4 is sexual companionship.
Oh, of course.
The evolutionary drive to reproduce and find a mate is arguably the second most powerful force after pure survival.
And this infiltrates almost every industry.
It really does.
I mean, the entire cosmetic industry, the fragrance industry, high-end fashion, luxury cars. So much of it implicitly promises that consuming the product will make you more attractive, more desirable, and more likely to secure a mate.
Yep. Number 5 is comfortable living conditions. We desire shelter from the elements, warmth, and physical ease.
Makes sense.
It's why we invest so heavily in real estate, ergonomic furniture, and climate control.
Okay, what's next? Number 6 is fascinating to me. To be superior, winning, keeping up with the Joneses. This is pure tribal hierarchy.
It is. It is the driving force behind luxury branding. When someone buys a watch that costs as much as a house, they aren't buying it to tell the time more accurately.
No, a $20 digital watch does that way better.
Exactly. They are buying a socially recognized symbol of superiority.
Right.
They are securing their status at the top of the tribal hierarchy.
Which flows right into number 7, care and protection of loved ones.
Right. We are biologically driven to ensure our genetic lineage survives. The desire to protect our children overrides almost every other logical thought process.
I can see that.
If a marketer can convince a parent that product A is marginally safer for their baby than product B, the parent will pay triple the price without even blinking.
Because you can't put a price tag on that primal drive.
Exactly. And finally, number 8, social approval.
Social approval. Why is that hardwired into us?
Well, in ancestral times, banishment from the tribe meant certain death. You could not survive alone in the wilderness.
Wow, okay.
Therefore, the desire to be accepted, to belong, and to have the approval of our peers is literally a survival mechanism. It drives social media behavior, fashion trends, and cultural conformity.
So we have survival, food, freedom from pain, sex, comfort, superiority, protection of loved ones, and social approval.
Those are the 8.
Think of the human brain like a smartphone. The logical things we care about, which we'll discuss later, are like apps you download.
Okay, I like this.
They're useful, but you can always force quit them or delete them if you get bored. But the Life Force 8 desires are the operating system. They are hard-coded into the firmware.
Yes.
You cannot delete your desire for survival or social approval. If an advertisement sends a push notification directly to the operating system, it instantly overrides whatever app you are currently looking at.
That is the perfect analogy. You cannot suppress these 8 desires, no matter how civilized or intellectual you believe you are.
You just can't.
You cannot simply use your willpower to turn off your biological desire to eat. You cannot suppress your instinct to dive in front of a speeding car to save your child.
Right.
These aren't lifestyle choices. They are hardwired biological imperatives. When you, as a communicator, tap into these LF8 desires, it is like pushing a plug directly into a high-voltage electrical outlet.
The staggering power is already surging. You're just connecting your product to it.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate leverage. If your product or your message can credibly promise to satisfy one of those 8 desires, the human brain is physiologically compelled to pay attention.
It literally has no choice.
But the tragedy is that so many businesses completely ignore this firmware. They spend thousands of dollars talking about their innovative, synergistic paradigms instead of explaining how their product provides comfortable living conditions, frees the buyer from pain, or helps them win the status game.
It's true. And if listeners want concrete, unassailable proof of just how drastically this framework changes human behavior, the source material gives us an incredible real-world case study from the 1920s and 30s.
Oh, this is the book guy, right?
Yes. It involves a mail-order guru named Emanuel Haldeman Julius.
I love this example because it strips away all the variables of modern marketing. There's no algorithms, no video, no flashy web design, just text on a page.
Right. Haldeman Julius is a legend in direct response marketing. He published the Little Blue Book series and sold over 200 million copies of these small 5-cent books through mail order.
200 million back then.
Yes. And his advertising strategy was brutally minimalist. He would buy full-page ads in newspapers, and the ad was basically just a massive, dense list of the book titles he offered, with a little checkbox next to each one.
So there was no clever copy trying to sell the plot of the books, no fancy illustrations of the characters, just hundreds of titles.
Right. And because of this setup, he was able to run a genius, massive-scale psychological experiment.
How do you do that?
He tracked exactly how many copies each title sold per year. If a book was a dud and wasn't selling, he didn't try to write better ad copy about the book. He didn't change the font size. He actually went in and changed the title of the book to specifically target one of the LF8 desires.
And the contents of the book remained identical.
Completely identical.
This goes back to our hook at the very beginning of the show. Same book, different cover.
Exactly. He meticulously analyzed the data and found that 2 of the strongest appeals he could inject into a title were sex, which is LF8 number 4, and self-improvement or survival, which falls under LF8 numbers 1 and 6.
Let's analyze the data points from this experiment because they prove that it's rarely the product itself that people are rejecting. It's the framing of the product.
Okay, let's walk through these titles.
What was the first major transformation?
He had a book originally titled Fleece of Gold. It was a story by Théophile Gautier. As Fleece of Gold, it was selling a meager 6,000 copies a year.
6,000, okay.
Haldeman Julius looked at that title and realized it was abstract. It sounded like an economic treatise or a dry lesson on Greek mythology. It didn't trigger any biological drive.
So what did he do?
He changed the title to Quest for a Blonde Mistress.
Oh, wow. That is an incredible pivot. He tapped directly into LF8 number 4, sexual companionship.
And the impact was instantaneous. Sales skyrocketed from 6,000 to 50,000 copies a year.
50,000.
Think about what is happening in the buyer's mind. When they read Fleece of Gold, their mind remains blank. When they read Quest for a Blonde Mistress, they immediately visualize an adventure fueled by romance and sexual desire.
And the internal text of the book didn't change a single comma.
Not one. Just the psychological trigger on the cover.
Okay, let's look at another one. What else did he change?
He had a book featuring the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer, originally titled Art of Controversy.
Art of Controversy. Let me guess, it didn't do well.
It sold 0 copies.
0.
Completely dead. Nobody cared about the abstract art of being controversial, so he changed the title to How to Argue Logically.
Which hits LF8 number 6. To be superior, winning, keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly.
People don't want to study abstract controversy. They want to win arguments against their annoying brother-in-law or their boss. They want intellectual dominance. And what happened to the sales?
The sales went from absolute 0 to 30,000 copies a year.
Unbelievable.
He identified a pain point, losing arguments and feeling inferior, and promised a solution that satisfied the biological drive for superiority.
Do you have another one?
Here's another classic. He was selling a biography titled Casanova and His Loves. It sold a respectable 8,000 copies.
Okay, not bad.
But Haldeman Julius knew he could push it further. He tweaked it to Casanova, history's greatest lover.
Oh, by adding history's greatest lover, he emphasizes the absolute pinnacle of sexual prowess and status.
Yes.
It's not just about a guy named Casanova anymore. It's a promise that the reader might learn the secrets of the ultimate alpha male.
And that subtle shift caused sales to jump to 22,000 copies.
Wow. My favorite one from this list is the next one, though, simply because the original title is so profoundly terrible.
Oh, it really is.
He had a book called Apothegms. Now, I consider myself well-read, but I had to look up what an apothegm even is.
It's a short, pithy, instructive saying, like a proverb.
Right. And unsurprisingly, a book titled With an Obscure 16th Century Word only sold 2,000 copies. It sounds like a medical condition. What did he change it to?
He completely rebranded it to Truth About the Riddle of Life.
That is brilliant. He tapped straight into LF8 number 1, survival, life extension, and understanding our existence.
Yep.
He took a boring collection of proverbs and framed it as the key to unlocking the existential dread of human mortality.
The result. Sales jumped from 2,000 to 9,000 copies.
That's a huge jump.
The practical takeaway here for anyone trying to persuade an audience is massive. When your message is failing, your instinct might be to scrap the whole product, tear down the website, or rebuild the service from scratch.
Because you think the product is broken.
Exactly. But you don't always need to do that. Sometimes you simply need to reframe how your product satisfies a primal LF8 desire.
You have to translate the features of what you do into the universal language of survival, status, protection, or romance.
Precisely.
Okay, I am entirely sold on the power of the Life Force 8. But I want to be the proxy for the skeptical listener right now because a very logical question arises from all this.
Okay, bring it on.
When I go to the grocery store, I clip coupons. When I buy a car, I look at the miles per gallon and the maintenance costs. I buy things for highly logical reasons. I want efficiency. I want a good bargain. I want things to be convenient and dependable. Are you telling me that none of that matters?
It absolutely matters, but we have to understand where those logical desires fit into the psychological hierarchy.
Okay.
The psychology manual categorizes these logical drivers as the 9 learned or secondary wants.
So what are these 9 secondary wants?
They include the desire to be informed, curiosity, cleanliness, efficiency, convenience, dependability, beauty and style, economy and profit, and bargains.
Okay, so efficiency and getting a bargain are real desires, but you are saying they operate in a completely different weight class than the LF8.
The crucial defining distinction is right there in the name, learned wants. We are not born with these desires. We learn them through socialization, upbringing, and interacting with our culture.
Oh, that makes sense.
A baby is born crying out for food and warmth, which are LF8 drives. A baby does not give a second thought to economy, profit, or maximizing desk efficiency.
Right.
Because these secondary wants are learned, they are essentially just software. They are not hardwired into our ancestral survival circuitry. Therefore, when they come into conflict with the primal drives, they are left in the dust by the overwhelming power of the life force 8.
The source text actually uses a vivid burning building analogy to make this hierarchy incredibly concrete, and I think it perfectly illustrates the gap between logic and biology.
A great analogy.
Imagine you're in a large department store. You are browsing the racks, and your primary motivation is finding a good bargain, which is one of the secondary wants.
Right.
Suddenly, the fire alarm goes off. You smell thick smoke coming from the escalator. In that split second, are you going to stop and think, I really desire a good bargain right now. I should quickly purchase this shirt before I flee?
Of course not. The biological drive for survival, escaping the burning building, instantly and completely overrides your learned desire for a bargain. The software app is force closed, and the emergency operating system takes over.
Or consider a more mundane scenario. Let's say you are highly driven by the secondary want of efficiency. You are determined to organize your desk and color code your files.
Okay.
But then the extremely attractive person you've been flirting with at the office walks by and asks if you want to go grab a drink right now. Are you going to say, no, I must satisfy my learned desire for file dependability? No. The biological drive for sexual companionship will instantly overpower the learned desire for a clean desk.
Biology is king. When you appeal to a secondary want, like when you talk about a 10% discount or an efficient processing speed, you're making a polite, logical request to the brain.
Right.
But when you appeal to the LF8, you are triggering a biological imperative.
This brings up the most critical mechanical question of the deep dive. We understand what the drives are, but how do we actually activate them?
The mechanism.
Yeah. What is the specific mechanism that turns black ink on a page or pixels on a screen into a biological imperative in a stranger's brain?
To understand the mechanism, we have to look at the psychological formula for how desire is actually manufactured in the mind. It operates as a 3-step sequence. Tension creates desire, which leads to an action to satisfy.
Let's break that down. Tension, desire, action.
When you remind someone of an LF8 desire that isn't currently being met in their life, you introduce psychological tension.
Give me an example.
If you remind them that their house might be vulnerable to burglars, you create tension regarding LF8 number 3, freedom from fear. They suddenly feel a profound lack of safety.
And that lack creates desire.
Exactly. That uncomfortable lack creates a strong, burning desire to return to a state of equilibrium. And that intense desire motivates the action, like buying your deadbolt lock or your alarm system, to satisfy the tension and restore peace.
But I'm still trying to grasp the physics of this. If I'm just reading words in an email or looking at a static picture on a website, how does that create real tension? I'm not actually in a burning building.
This is where we get into one of the most fascinating phenomena in human neurology. It's a concept the text refers to as vicarious LF8 desire fulfillment.
Vicarious fulfillment. This feels like the absolute secret sauce of all great copywriting and persuasion. How does it work?
It relies on the brain's mirror neuron system. This is a quirk of human biology where we don't just feel pleasure when we physically satisfy our own desires.
Yeah.
We actually experience a simulated neurological form of pleasure when we read about or vividly visualize someone else satisfying that desire.
Oh, it's like when you watch someone on a cooking show bite into a lemon and your own mouth physically puckers.
Exactly.
The ad copy is forcing your brain to taste the experience before you even buy the product.
That is the exact mechanism. The text gives a brilliant example of a hypothetical consumer named George Vincent who has been drowning in debt.
Okay, poor George.
An effective ad targeting people like George doesn't just offer efficient financial processing. That's a weak secondary want.
Right. Nobody cares about processing.
Instead, the ad tells a story. It describes George Vincent leaning back in his luxurious, oversized leather chair. He has a relaxed, devil-may-care smile on his face. He is casually writing his final checks to his creditors, knowing his bank account is flush with cash and he is completely debt-free.
Wow. As a prospect reads that highly descriptive scenario, they aren't just processing the grammatical information. They are being forced to play a beautifully detailed, high-definition movie inside their own minds.
They are mentally projecting their own consciousness into that leather chair. Because the description is so sensory, they begin to physically feel the relief of having the weight of debt lifted off their shoulders.
So they're experiencing the LF8 desires.
Yes. They are vicariously experiencing the freedom from fear and danger, LF8 number 3, and the comfortable living conditions, LF8 number 5.
The ultimate goal of the communication isn't to list the features of the debt relief program. The goal is to get the prospect to visually demonstrate the result of the product inside their own heads. You want them to mentally try it on the way you try on a jacket in a store.
If you can force the prospect to run that mental simulation vividly enough, the brain reacts almost as if the experience is real.
And that creates the tension.
Exactly. The contrast between the immense pleasure of the mental simulation and the painful reality of their actual debt creates massive psychological tension. They want the feeling they just simulated, and buying your product becomes the only logical action to achieve it.
There is a famous quote in the text from the legendary Young and Rubicam advertising agency that sums up this entire dynamic perfectly.
What is it?
They said, "People buy because of emotion and justify with logic. Force an emotional response by touching a basic want, then let them justify it with logic."
That is the ultimate 1-2 punch of persuasion. You use the Life Force 8, the vivid mental movies of survival, status, protection, or romance, to force the emotional response. You make them crave the feeling.
That gets them securely on the hook.
Then, and only then, do you provide the secondary learned wants. You give them the efficiency metrics, the 20% off bargain, the dependability statistics.
Because their emotional brain has already decided it wants the product, but it needs an alibi.
An alibi, exactly.
It needs the logic so it doesn't feel irresponsible. You give them the logic so they can tell their spouse, "Honey, I had to buy the 550 horsepower luxury car. The miles per gallon efficiency on the highways is too dependable to pass up."
They buy the car for social approval and status, but they use the secondary learned wants to justify the purchase to themselves and others.
So, synthesizing everything we've explored today, the soul of this chapter, the absolute core insight, is that successful communication requires stepping completely out of your own ego.
Yes, emptying the teacup.
You have to finally empty your teacup of what you want to say about yourself. You have to stop talking about your smoke-belching factory, your impressive resume, or your desperate desire to be seen as clever and creative.
The ultimate shortcut to being profoundly persuasive is to stop focusing on the features of what you do. You must transform your communication into a mirror.
A mirror, I love that.
When the consumer looks at your website, your pitch, or your ad, they shouldn't see you. They should see a reflection of their deepest biological drive staring right back at them. You show them their own safety, their own elevated status, the survival of their legacy, and the protection of their loved ones.
And if you can clearly demonstrate that your product is the definitive vehicle to achieve those primal desires, the persuasion happens almost automatically.
It is a total paradigm shift. You stop selling the drill. You don't even just sell the hole in the wall. You sell the feeling of overwhelming social approval and comfortable living that comes from having a beautifully decorated home that all your friends envy.
You are selling Life Force 8 fulfillment.
And once you view human behavior through the lens of the LF8, you will never look at a commercial, a sales page, or an email the same way again.
So now that you know exactly what people want, the primal, inescapable drives of the Life Force 8, the next challenge is execution. How do you actually bypass their critical thinking to make them believe that you are the specific provider who can deliver it?
Because knowing what they want is only half the battle.
Right. Proving you are the ultimate solution is the next step. Next time, we dive into the 17 foundational principles of consumer psychology to uncover exactly how to structure that proof.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Think about the last 3 major purchases you made. Really picture them in your mind. You probably told yourself you bought them because they were efficient, or they were a fantastic bargain, or you simply needed them for practical reasons. But I challenge you to look closer. Strip away the polite, logical justifications. Which of the Life Force 8 biological drives was secretly pulling the strings behind your wallet? When you bought that new jacket, that car, or that software subscription, were you really buying utility, or were you buying survival, superiority, and social approval? What if you could tap directly into the biological hardwiring of your customers' brains?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, imagine literally pushing a plug straight into a high voltage outlet, so they absolutely have to pay attention to your business.
I mean, that sounds a bit like science fiction, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe some sort of dystopian mind control.
Yeah, totally.
But it is actually the absolute foundation of human psychology. It's not magic, it's biology.
Yeah.
And it is happening to you. And, well, everyone around you every single time you open an app or walk down a grocery aisle
Mm-hmm.
or check your email.
Right. So today we are completely bypassing the endless guesswork of marketing and sales. We are taking a deep dive into the source material from True Eric Whitman's work, specifically his chapter on what people really want.
Which is such a crucial topic.
Exactly. So for anyone listening who is interested in business or entrepreneurship or just, understanding why we buy what we buy, mastering these concepts is huge. It's basically the difference between being ignored in a sea of digital noise and creating messages that your prospects are chemically inescapably compelled to care about.
Yeah, and this is incredibly relevant for all of us because we love to tell ourselves a very specific story about who we are.
What do you mean?
Like we like to think of ourselves as these highly evolved, rational, logical decision makers,
Right.
people who carefully weigh the pros and cons of every single person.
Oh, right. Like we're all just carrying around little spreadsheets in our heads.
Exactly. But when you actually look at the research, the decisions we make, especially the ones involving our time, our attention, and obviously our wallets, they're rooted in these deep biological drives that were programmed into our nervous systems hundreds of thousands of years before the concept of currency even existed.
Okay, let's unpack this because to really understand how this works today, the best place to start is actually it's back in the 1930s with this massive wake-up call to the advertising industry.
Yes. The Starch reports.
Right. The source material brings up a psychologist named Daniel Starch. Can you sort of set the scene for us? Like, what was going on in the 1930s that makes starch so important?
So you really have to picture the advertising landscape of that era. This was a golden age of print.
Okay.
Companies were spending absolute fortunes on these massive multi-page magazine spreads. But there's a fundamental flaw in their approach.
Which was?
These ads were essentially just giant, expensive monuments to the companies themselves.
Right. The text actually mentions they would literally print full-page photos of their smoke-belching factories.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they would boast about their square footage, and they would print out these dry org charts of how many people they had on staff and show off their heavy machinery. And I love this detail. They would use unusual camera angle to make their conveyor belts look, I don't know, majestic.
Majestic conveyor belts, right, because the prevailing logic in these corporate boardrooms across the country was basically, we are a massive, wealthy, impressive institution. Therefore, if we show the consumer how impressive our infrastructure is, they will naturally be awed by our superiority and clamor to buy our products.
They were just completely in love with themselves.
100%. And then Daniel Starch came along. He was the nation's leading advertising and marketing psychologist at the time, and he released his famous advertising readership reports. He essentially just dropped a bomb on Madison Avenue.
So what did the reports actually say?
He told these massive corporations, and he backed this up with hard empirical data, that more than half of the people reading those magazines were completely ignoring those oh-so-great ads.
Wow, more than half.
Yeah. They were just flipping right past the majestic photos of the factories and the unusual camera angles. The millions of dollars these companies spent boasting about their facilities were almost entirely wasted.
It's like going on a really terrible first date.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine sitting across from someone at a nice restaurant, and for an hour straight, they do absolutely nothing but brag about their resume, the square footage of their apartment, the horsepower of their car, and their 5-year career plan.
Sounds exhausting.
Right. And they never stop to ask a single question about you or your interests or how your day was. You'd be sitting there calculating the polite minimum amount of time before you could, fake an emergency and bolt for the exit.
That is a perfect analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates consumer behavior. Starch's research proved a foundational premise that, astonishingly, is still ignored by a vast majority of businesses today.
Which is what?
The premise is this: people do not care about the advertiser.
Huh.
Period. They do not care about your company's history. They don't care about your mission statement, your fancy new headquarters, or, honestly, how hard you work to develop your product.
Mm-hmm.
They care entirely, exclusively, and relentlessly about themselves.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that just a little bit.
Sure.
Are you saying consumers have zero capacity to care about a company? Because what about brand loyalty? I mean, people wear Apple logos or they buy Patagonia because they care about the company's environmental mission, don't they?
That is a really common counterargument, but let's look at the underlying psychology there.
Yeah.
When someone buys a Patagonia jacket because of its environmental stance, are they doing it because they care deeply about Patagonia's corporate board of directors?
Well, no.
No. They are doing it because buying that jacket makes them feel virtuous.
Cool.
It signals to their peer group what kind of person they are.
Ah, I see.
It fulfills their own desire to be seen as environmentally conscious. Even brand loyalty is ultimately a vehicle for self-expression and self-satisfaction. We are just constantly, exclusively tuned in to one internal radio station, which is WIIFM.
WIFM, what's in it for me?
Exactly, what's in it for me?
Okay, so Starch revealed that consumers are ruthlessly egocentric. They only filter the world through the lens of, like, how will this product make my life better? How will it make me happier? How will it solve my specific problem?
Precisely. And it sounds like such obvious common sense when we say it out loud, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yet, take a critical look at the marketing you encounter every day. Scroll through the sponsored posts on your social media feed right now, or read the cold emails in your inbox, or look at the landing pages of modern B2B software companies.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
You will still see companies shouting, "Our proprietary algorithm is the fastest," or "We have been industry leaders since 1998. They're still falling in love with their own processes. They're literally still printing photos of their smoke-belching factories just, in a digital format.
So if you are listening to this right now, your immediate practical takeaway is to ruthlessly audit your own marketing materials.
Yes.
Look at your website, your pitch deck, your brochures, count how many times you use the words we, our, and us, and then count how many times you use the word you.
That's a great test.
If the we's outnumber the you's, you are failing the starch test. You have to flip the script. Like, if you're selling a pizza, your customer doesn't care that we imported a brick oven from Naples. They care that you get a perfectly crispy, blistered crust that melts in your mouth every single time. You must translate your feature into their personal benefit.
Exactly. It requires a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You have to stop looking at your product from the inside out, meaning how you built it, and start looking at it from the outside in. You have to view it through the eyes of a consumer who is fiercely, biologically protective of their own self-interest.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We are fundamentally egocentric, but I feel like that raises a bigger question.
What's that?
If we accept that people only care about themselves, we need to know exactly what caring about themselves actually looks like. What is the self searching for? And this brings us to what the source material calls the Life Force 8, or the LF8.
Yes, the LF8. The researchers and evolutionary psychologists who study human behavior have essentially mapped the human nervous system to identify the core drivers of action.
Okay.
And the LF8 are the 8 powerful foundational desires that are responsible for more sales, more motivation, and more human action than all other wants combined.
Okay, I'm going to run through this list of 8 really quickly so we know what we're dealing with, but then I want to slow down and dissect them.
Sounds good.
Because if these are the puppet strings of human behavior, we need to know exactly how they are pulled. So here's the LF8. Number 1, survival, enjoyment of life, life extension.
Right.
Number 2, enjoyment of food and beverages. Number 3, freedom from fear, pain, and danger. Number 4, sexual companionship. Number 5, comfortable living conditions. Number 6, to be superior, winning, keeping up with the Joneses. Number 7, care and protection of loved ones. And number 8, social approval.
So when you hear that list, it feels immediately recognizable. You can't really argue with it because we all feel those pulls every single day. But what is vital to understand here, and this is where the biology comes in, is that these are not learned behaviors.
What do you mean by not learn it?
You didn't go to school to learn to want these things. Your parents didn't teach you to want to survive. They are biologically hardwired into our species. They are survival mechanisms that have been encoded into our DNA over millions of years.
The text uses a really vivid analogy here, actually. It compares tapping into the LF8 to jumping onto a speeding train.
It's the perfect metaphor. Think about trying to create a new desire in a consumer. That's like trying to build a train, lay the tracks, fuel the engine, and then push it up a hill by yourself.
Just exhausted.
It's exhausting, and it usually fails. But the LF8 are trains that are already speeding down the tracks at 100 miles an hour in the minds of your prospects. You don't have to lift a finger to get them moving.
That makes so much sense.
Like, you cannot shake the desire to eat. If you try to starve yourself, your biology will eventually overpower your willpower. You cannot suppress the fundamental will to survive. You cannot stop caring if your child lives both ways before crossing a busy street.
Wait, let me clarify something here because this can sound a bit deterministic.
Okay.
Are you saying consumers have absolute zero free will when a marketer pushes an LF8 button? Like, that we are just biological robots.
Well, I'm not saying we have zero free will. A consumer can obviously choose not to buy a specific brand of potato chips, for example.
Right. But what they cannot choose to do is turn off the biological craving for calorically dense foods. We have the free will to choose the vehicle that satisfies the desire, but we do not have the free will to turn off the desire itself.
Ah, I see the distinction.
So when you align your product with an LF8, you are not trying to convince someone to want something new. You are harnessing the unstoppable momentum of Mother Nature. You are plugging your message into a current that is already flowing at maximum voltage.
Let's break these down a bit because some of them, like survival and food, they seem obvious. But the psychology behind how they are marketed is actually quite nuanced.
Definitely.
Let's start with number one, survival, enjoyment of life, life extension. How does this actually play out in the marketplace beyond just, selling medicine or hospital services?
Well, survival is rooted in the oldest part of our brain, often colloquially called the reptilian brain. It is the absolute highest priority of our nervous system. But in marketing, survival doesn't just look like a man running from a bear.
What does it look like? It looks like the multi-billion-dollar wellness industry. It looks like anti-aging creams. I mean, why do people spend hundreds of dollars on tiny jars of serum? They aren't just buying moisturizer, they are buying the illusion of life extension. They are fighting the physical markers of mortality.
Wow, that's kind of dark, but totally true. And what about number two? Enjoyment of food and beverages. Obviously, we need to eat to live, but the LF8 specifically says enjoyment of food. Why is the enjoyment part hardwired?
Because for 99% of human history, calories were incredibly scarce. Finding a source of dense fat or sugar like a honeycomb or an animal carcass was a rare life-saving event.
Right.
So our brains evolved to release massive amounts of dopamine when we consume those things, basically to ensure we gorge on them while we can.
Eat it now before it goes bad or before someone else eats it.
Exactly. And today, we live in an environment of complete caloric abundance. But we're still operating on Pleistocene-era brain hardware. So when a fast food commercial shows a slow-motion macro close-up shot of melted cheese stretching off a burger, they aren't appealing to your logical need for daily sustenance.
No, they're not talking about vitamins.
Right. They are hijacking that ancient survival hardware that screams caloric density. Eat this now or starve later.
That brings us right to number three. Freedom from fear, pain, and danger. This feels very tied to the amygdala, our brain's threat detection center.
Yes, exactly. We are the descendants of the hominids who were the most paranoid.
The ones who jumped at shadows.
Precisely. The ones who assumed the rustling in the bushes was a saber-toothed tiger, not just the wind. Those were the ones who survived to pass on their genes. We are hardwired to notice threats way before we notice opportunities.
So how does that translate to modern marketing?
In marketing, this is where you see the power of agitation. Selling insurance, for example, is entirely based on LF8 number 3. You are selling peace of mind. You are selling a chemical reduction in cortisol. When a cybersecurity software company tells a CEO, one breach could destroy the reputation you've spent 20 years building, they are triggering that ancient fear of catastrophic loss.
Interesting. Okay, number 4 is sexual companionship. The old adage is sex sells, but from an evolutionary perspective, this is just the drive to replicate our DNA, right?
Yes, but the application in modern business is rarely as overt as, pornography. It was highly sublimated.
Sublimated how?
It's the sports car commercial that implicitly promises that driving this vehicle will make you more attractive to potential mates. It's the entire cosmetics and fashion industry. It's the gym membership that isn't sold on the promise of better cardiovascular health, but on the promise of a physique that commands attention.
Right.
Okay, let's look at number 5. Comfortable living conditions. I was wondering about this one. Is the desire for a soft mattress or a climate-controlled house a biological imperative, or are we just naturally lazy?
It's not laziness at all, it's the conservation of energy. Oh, yeah. In the wild, expending unnecessary energy could literally lead to death if you couldn't find your next meal. So we evolved a strong desire for comfort, because comfort represents a state where we are not burning precious calories just to maintain our body temperature or to heal from sleeping on rocks.
That makes total sense.
Today, this drives the sales of HVAC systems, ergonomic office chairs, noise-canceling headphones, memory foam mattresses. You are selling the biological luxury of energy conservation.
Now, number 6 is where it gets really fascinating to me. To be superior, Winning, keeping up with the Joneses, why is wanting a nicer lawnmower than my neighbor, or a Rolex instead of a Casio, a biological imperative? Because that really just feels like pure ego. It feels like ego, sure, but it goes straight back to our ancestors living in tribes of maybe 50 to 150 people. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, your status within the group wasn't just an ego boost. It was a literal matter of life and death.
Because of resources.
Yes. The individuals with the highest status, the ones who were superior, got the best access to limited food, the safest sleeping arrangements in the center of the camp, and the best choice of mates. So we evolved a deeply seated, hypersensitive biological drive to constantly monitor our status relative to our peers and strive to elevate it.
So today, that doesn't mean fighting for the best piece of mammoth meat. It means buying the luxury car or getting the black metal credit card or dropping names in a corporate meeting. It's the exact same biological software running on modern hardware.
Precisely. When Rolex sells a watch, they are not selling a device that tells time. A $10 digital watch tells time far more accurately. Rolex is selling LF8 number 6. They are selling a socially recognized marker of dominance and superiority. They are selling the feeling of walking into a room and implicitly signaling to the tribe that you are at the top of the hierarchy.
That perfectly sets up number 7, care and protection of loved ones. If superiority is about dominating the tribe, number 7 is about ensuring your specific genes survive.
Evolutionary biologists call this kin selection. We are hardwired to prioritize the survival of our offspring even over our own comfort. It's the mama bear instinct.
Right.
Think about how much money parents spend on high-end baby monitors with vital sign tracking or top-of-the-line car seats or all-organic baby food. They aren't just buying electronics or pureed carrots. They are buying the alleviation of the biological terror that something might happen to their genetic legacy.
Wow. And finally, number 8, social approval. How is this different from number 6, superiority?
Superiority is about fighting to be at the top of the hierarchy. Social approval is simply about not getting kicked out of the tribe altogether.
Oh, just baseline acceptance.
Yes. In the prehistoric world, an isolated human was a dead human. You could not survive alone. Therefore, social rejection literally registers in the modern human brain, specifically in the anterior cingulate cortex, in the exact same way as physical pain.
Isolation equals physical pain.
Yes. So when an advertisement implies that wearing a certain brand of sneakers or drinking a certain brand of beer will make you accepted, admired, and part of the in-group, it is pulling on a deeply ingrained survival lever. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, isn't just a trendy internet term. It is a primal anxiety about being left behind by the safety of the herd.
So, practically speaking, if you're a business owner or a marketer listening to this, before you write a single word of a promotion, an email, or a landing page, your first job is to identify which of the LF8 your product or service satisfies. That must become the core pillar of your pitch.
Absolutely. Let's say you sell car tires.
Okay.
If you focus on your product's features, you are selling rubber, steel belts, and tread patterns. Nobody wakes up in a cold sweat desperately wanting vulcanized rubber. But what if you map those features to the LF8? You are selling LF8 number 3, freedom from fear, pain, and danger. And you are selling number 7, care and protection of loved ones.
So the copy changes from buy our tires, they have a 10mm asymmetric tread pattern, to when the highway freezes over, make sure your family's car stops on a dime.
Exactly.
You bypass the logical evaluation of rubber and go straight to the biological imperative of keeping your kids alive.
Exactly. You map the feature directly onto a biological drive. That is how you plug into the high voltage outlet.
Okay, this theory is incredibly compelling, but I can imagine a skeptical listener thinking, this all sounds great in an evolutionary psychology textbook, but how do we know this actually works in practice to move the needle on sales?
That's a fair question.
And the source material provides a brilliant empirical historical masterclass on just how undeniable these LF8 drives are. We have to talk about Emanuel Haldeman Julius.
Ah, yes. Emanuel Haldeman Julius. For anyone studying direct response marketing or consumer behavior, he is one of the most fascinating case studies of the 20th century.
Set the stage for us. Who was he?
He's a mail-order book guru operating primarily in the 1920s and 30s. He sold these simple little 5-cent books called Little Blue Books, and he ended up selling an astonishing amount of them. Over 200 million copies across nearly 2,000 different titles.
200 million books in the 1920s and 30s. That's insane. And what makes him so relevant to our discussion is his advertising strategy. It was shockingly simple, and it effectively acted as a massive nationwide psychological experiment.
Right.
He didn't write long, flowery, persuasive copy describing the plot of the books or the credentials of the authors. He would buy full-page newspaper ads and just list the titles of the books in tiny text. That was it. Just a giant menu of titles.
It was pure A/B testing before the internet even existed.
Yeah.
And the genius was in what he did when a book didn't sell.
Which is usually what did publishers normally do?
Most publishers today, if a book flops, they might try to redesign the cover, spend money on a PR tour, or just write it off as a loss and blame the market. Haldum Julius did something completely different. He didn't change the book itself. The pages inside, the words the author wrote, they remained exactly the same. He simply changed the title of the book in his next advertisement, and then he tracked the response.
The data from these title changes is staggering. The source material highlights a few of these, and it perfectly illustrates the power of the LF8. There was a book originally titled Fleece of Gold. Under that title, it sold a respectable 5,000 copies a year.
Okay.
Then Haldum and Julius changed the title to Quest for a Blonde Mistress. It is the exact same book. The text didn't change by a single comma, but under the new title, sales skyrocketed to 50,000 copies a year, a 900% increase.
And let's analyze exactly why that happened through the lens of the biological drives. Fleece of Gold is a poetic, perhaps somewhat abstract title. It might appeal to someone's curiosity or an appreciation for mythology. But Quest for a Blonde Mistress, that strips away the poetry and plugs directly, unapologetically, into LF8 number 4. Sexual companionship. It is visceral. It triggers a biological speeding train. The brain sees that title and the evolutionary software fires up.
Let's look at another one. He had a book called Art of Controversy. Annual sales under that title, 0. Literally nobody wanted it.
0. Wow.
He changed the title to How to Argue Logically. Sales jumped from 0 to 30,000 copies a year.
Again, he took a feature and mapped it to a core drive. Art of Controversy sounds academic. It sounds like a college philosophy syllabus, which to most people sounds like tedious work.
Right.
But How to Argue Logically, that appeals directly to LF8 number 6. To be superior, winning, keeping up with the Joneses, it promises the reader a specific tool to gain a social advantage over others, to win debates at the dinner table, to elevate their status in the workplace. It transforms an academic subject into a weapon for social dominance.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a massive caveat because I can hear the modern marketer listening right now thinking, wait a minute, changing Fleece of Gold to Quest for a Blonde Mistress. Isn't this just the 1920s version of cheap clickbait? Are we just talking about manipulating people with sensationalism? Because if I do that today on Facebook, my ad account gets banned and my customers will leave terrible reviews.
That is an excellent pushback, and it raises a vital distinction we absolutely must make. What is fascinating here, and what separates genuine psychological marketing from cheap manipulation, is that it's not clickbait if the product actually delivers on the promise.
Explain the difference.
Clickbait is a bait and switch. It's when a headline promises a shocking revelation or a specific benefit, but the content behind the click completely fails to provide it. That destroys trust. But Haldum and Julius wasn't running a scam. The text inside the book, previously called Art of Controversy, actually did teach you how to argue logically. The book, previously called Fleece of Gold, actually was a story about a quest involving a blonde mistress. He didn't change the reality of the product. He just aligned the entry point with a pre-existing biological drive so that people would actually care enough to engage with it.
People buy because of emotion, and they justify with logic.
Precisely. The emotion, the biological drive triggered by the title, gets them through the door. It captures their attention. But the logic, the actual value, quality, and utility of the product is what keeps them there, satisfies them, and prevents buyer's remorse.
So he proved you don't always need a new product.
Exactly. Haldum and Julius proved that you don't necessarily need to overhaul your entire product or service if it's not selling. The inherent value might already be there. You might just have the wrong label on the box. You might just need to repackage your hook so it aligns with an inescapable human drive. You need to stop selling the art of controversy and start selling how to win.
So to bridge the gap from 1920s direct mail to modern digital business, if you are running A/B tests on your sauce landing page and your headline says comprehensive data analytics platform, you are selling art of controversy.
Yep.
If you test a new headline that says uncover the hidden data your competitors are using to steal your customers, you are suddenly tapping into LF8 number 3, which is fear of danger and loss, and number 6, superiority and winning. You haven't changed your software. You've changed the biological lock your key fits into.
Exactly. And the modern tools we have for A/B testing, like Facebook ads, Google ads, website optimization platforms, they allow us to execute Haldeman Julius's strategy at a scale and speed he couldn't have even imagined.
Okay, I am completely with you on the elephate. Survival, sex, status, fear, these are huge levers, but surely that's not the whole picture. Well, I'm thinking about my own purchases this week. I just bought a new, highly rated filing cabinet for my home office. There is absolutely no survival instinct in a filing cabinet. I wasn't trying to attract a mate, and I wasn't fighting off a predator. I just wanted to be more efficient and organized. Where does efficiency fit into this primal caveman theory?
That is exactly where we draw the line between hardwired biology and learned behavior. The researchers who mapped out the LF8 did not ignore all of our other desires. They recognized them, but they categorized them differently. This brings us to what the source material calls the 9 learned, or secondary, wants.
Okay, let's list these out. The 9 learned wants are to be informed, curiosity, cleanliness of body and surroundings, efficiency, convenience, dependability or quality, expression of beauty and style, economy or profit.
And bargains.
Now look at that list. Efficiency, convenience, dependability, bargains. Does that sound familiar?
That sounds like the bullet points on 90% of the advertisements, landing pages, and commercials we see every single day. Dependable service, convenient location, a great bargain. They do. And let's be clear, they are strong desires. You absolutely wanted that filing cabinet to be efficient. But here's the crucial fundamental distinction the source material makes. We are not born with these secondary wants. We learn them.
We learn them from society.
Yes, from culture, from our parents, from our environment. You are not born with a genetic predisposition to want a 20% discount. You learn the value of money over time. You are not born wanting an efficient workflow. You learn that efficiency saves time in a modern industrial society.
Right.
Because these wants are learned, they reside in a different, newer part of the brain, the neocortex. And because they are learned, they are infinitely weaker than our biological drives.
I love the analogy the text uses to prove this power differential. It's the ultimate test of biological drives versus learned desires.
It's a great thought experiment.
Let's paint the picture. Imagine you are out shopping at a high-end mall. You are browsing and you find a beautiful new designer shirt. It perfectly appeals to the learned want of expression of beauty and style. Furthermore, you look at the tag, and it's on a massive 70% clearance sale.
So it perfectly appeals to the learned want of getting a bargain.
Exactly. You are thrilled you have the shirt in your hand, and you are standing in line at the register to buy it. Suddenly, the fire alarm goes off, the sprinklers turn on, and you smell thick, acrid smoke coming from the back room.
What do? Do you calmly stay in line to secure your bargain and express your style? Or do you drop the shirt on the floor and sprint out of the burning building?
You drop the shirt and run. You don't even think about the 70% discount because LF8 #1 survival instantly, violently overrides every secondary want you possess.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture of persuasion, marketing, and human behavior, the text states that the secondary wants are completely clouded by the LF8 dust. Biology is king.
Biology is king.
When you appeal to a secondary want like dependability or bargain, you are asking the consumer's brain to engage in logical, learned, higher-order cognitive behavior. You are asking them to think. But when you appeal to an LF8, you are triggering a reflex. You are bypassing the critical thinking center and hitting the alarm bell.
So what is the practical takeaway here? Are we supposed to just ignore the secondary wants entirely? Because, I still want my filing cabinet to be efficient.
No, you don't ignore them. They provide the logical justification for the purchase. The practical takeaway is to never rely solely on a secondary want to carry the weight of your marketing. If you do, your message will be weak, easily ignored, and completely devoid of emotional tension. The secret is to use the secondary want as a bridge to an LF8.
Give me an example of how to build that bridge. Let's stick with the B2B software example because that's usually where marketing is the most dry and feature-heavy. Let's say I'm selling project management software, and my main selling point is efficiency.
If you stop at efficiency, your pitch is, our software saves your team 10 hours a week. That appeals to a learned want. It's logical, but it doesn't make anyone's pulse race. To build the bridge, you must ask yourself, why does the customer want those 10 hours back?
Yeah.
What biological drive does that extra time satisfy?
Okay, so I take it a step further. I don't just say our software saves you 10 hours a week. I say our software saves you 10 hours a week so you can close your laptop at 5 p.m. on a Friday and actually spend the weekend entirely present with your kids.
Boom. Right there. You have successfully bridged the learned want of efficiency to LF8 number 7, care and protection of loved ones.
That's powerful.
Or maybe you bridge it to LF8 number 3. Save 10 hours a week and eliminate the crushing Sunday night anxiety of falling behind. You've attached the logical secondary benefit to a biological speeding train. The efficiency is just the vehicle. The biological relief is the destination.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of theory. We know the targets. We know about the egocentric consumer, the immense power of the biological life force 8, and why they trump secondary learned wants every time. But knowing the target isn't the same as hitting it.
No, it's not.
How do we actually pull the trigger? How do we activate these drives in the consumer's mind using just words on a page or screen? This brings us to the final major concept, the formula for desire and directing what the source calls mental movies.
The source material provides a very elegant, simple psychological formula for this mechanism. Tension leads to desire, which leads to action to satisfy the desire.
Tension leads to desire, leads to action. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this concept of tension because colloquially, we usually think of tension as a bad thing, like muscle tension or workplace stress. We usually try to avoid it.
In a psychological and physiological sense, desire is just the tension you feel when a core need isn't met. It's an imbalance. If you haven't eaten all day, your blood sugar drops and the biological tension of hunger arises. That tension creates the desire for food. As the tension increases, the desire becomes overwhelming, and it physically compels you to take action, getting up, going to the kitchen, or driving to a restaurant to satisfy the desire, restore the balance, and resolve the tension.
So, as a business owner, a marketer, or a salesperson, your job is not just to present a product. Your job is to highlight or even ethically induce that tension by reminding the prospect of an unmet LF8 need and then presenting your product as the specific action that will relieve the tension.
Exactly. And the way we create that tension, the way we push that biological button, is entirely dependent on the specific words we use.
So.
The brain processes language in a very physical way. The source material walks through this incredible progression of specificity to show how vague language fails to create tension, while vivid language physically alters what happens in our minds.
Let's do this exercise right now because it really proves the point.
Yeah.
We're going to do an escalation of specificity to show the difference between vague communication and directing a mental movie. Listen to this progression. If I say to you, go somewhere and do something, what do you see in your mind's eye?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's a completely blank movie screen. There's no imagery, no subject, no action. The brain has nothing to latch onto.
Right. Now let's make it slightly more specific. Go to the kitchen and get food.
Okay, the screen is flickering to life. It's vague imagery. I know the general location and I know the objective, but it's not a vivid scene. It's a concept, not an experience.
Now let's turn it into a mental movie. Walk into the kitchen, grab the heavy steel handle of the oven, pull the door open, and pull out the hot food.
And right there, the difference is profound. The brain is forced to picture the physical act. You imagine the weight of the handle, the motion of pulling the door, maybe even the blast of heat. You literally cannot comprehend that sentence without briefly simulating the physical action in your mind.
And this isn't just a metaphor, right? This is actually how the brain works neurologically.
Yes. Functional MRI scans show that when you vividly imagine performing an action, or when you read highly descriptive sensory language about an action, the motor cortex and the sensory areas of your brain light up in a pattern that is remarkably similar to when you were actually performing the action. Your brain is running a low-level simulation.
This is where it gets really, really interesting. The text uses an ice cream analogy to demonstrate how powerfully this simulation can create biological tension. Let's say I'm trying to sell you a dessert. I could use facts and features. I could say, we sell a large ice cream sundae. It has chocolate and nuts.
Which satisfies the learned want of being informed, but it creates almost zero tension.
Exactly. It's the equivalent of go to the kitchen and get food. It's conceptual. But if you apply the principles of directing a mental movie using what the text calls positive visual adjectives,
Oh, this part is great.
then the copy changes. Listen to how this feels. Instead of large sundae, I say, imagine a giant hot fudge sundae with 3 massive scoops of thick, guittared mint chocolate chip ice cream. Picture steaming, extra dark hot fudge cascading over the sides, melting the mint chips, sprinkled with freshly chopped, salty, wet walnuts, and blanketed in a thick cloud of fluffy, sweet whipped cream with a bright red maraschino cherry resting on top.
I mean, if you are an ice cream lover, or honestly, even if you're just slightly hungry, you are suddenly experiencing real biological tension. Your salivary glands might literally be activating. Your mouth is watering. You are experiencing what psychologists call vicarious desire fulfillment.
Vicarious LF8 desire fulfillment. I love that phrase. It's actually physiologically pleasant for us to read about or vividly imagine how others have satisfied their desires or how we could satisfy them.
And this brings us to the most crucial psychological insight of the entire chapter. I want every listener to burn this into their memory. The first use of any product is inside the consumer's mind. I'll say that again because it changes everything about how you sell. The first use of any product is inside the consumer's mind.
Let me make sure I understand the depth of that. Before anyone buys your software, before they hire your consulting firm, before they order your pizza or buy your car tires, they have to run a mental simulation of themselves using it and experiencing the positive benefit. And if they can't run that simulation, they won't buy.
Exactly. Imagining the use of something is the prerequisite to desiring it. If you only provide dry facts, bullet points, and vague features, you are asking the consumer to be the director of their own mental movie.
Which is too much work.
Way too much work.
Hmm?
You're asking them to take your feature, our software integrates with your CRM, and do the heavy cognitive lifting of building a vivid mental movie of how that makes their daily life better and relieves their stress.
And people just won't do that.
Most consumers are too busy, too distracted, and frankly, too cognitively lazy to do that translation work for you.
Yeah.
If you give them a blank screen, they will just walk out of the theater. So they don't build the movie, they don't feel attention, and they don't take the action to buy.
But when you use action-oriented, vivid sensory language, you do the work for them. You bypass their analytical, critical thinking filter and inject the experience straight into their imagination. You force them to test drive the product in their mind's eye so viscerally that the tension of not having the product becomes overwhelming.
Exactly. You aren't just selling the physical components of the ice cream, you are selling the sensory experience of the hot fudge melting the cold mint chocolate chip on their tongue. You aren't just selling the deep tread of the tire, you are selling the deep, shuddering breath of relief a parent takes when their car stops safely on a rain-slicked highway, avoiding a crash. You are the director of the movie they play in their head.
I can see how this works beautifully for food or cars, things that are inherently sensory. But how does this apply to something totally abstract, like B2B services? Let's say I'm an accountant selling tax preparation services to small business owners. There is no hot fudge in tax prep. How do I direct a mental movie for that?
You find the emotional and physical relief that your service provides, and you make that the movie. You don't describe the tax forms. You describe the state of the business owner.
Oh, so?
You say, imagine waking up on April 14th without a knot in your stomach. Picture walking into your office, seeing a completely clear desk instead of a mountain of crumpled receipts, and knowing with absolute certainty that your business is bulletproof against an audit. Imagine the physical weight lifting off your shoulders as you realize you can finally focus entirely on growing your business instead of fighting with the IRS.
Wow. That is brilliant. You are making the relief visceral, the clear desk, the knot in the stomach disappearing, the weight lifting off the shoulders. That is a mental movie that triggers LF8 number 3, freedom from fear and pain. You are taking an abstract service and turning it into a biological rescue mission.
And that is the true power of understanding human psychology. It allows you to translate anything into the language the brain actually speaks.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today, and it feels like we've completely rewired how to look at human interaction and commerce. We didn't just walk through a list. We really dissected the machinery of influence.
It is a profound shift in perspective. Once you see the underlying biology, you really can't unsee it.
Just reflecting on this journey, we started with Daniel Stark shaking up the arrogant 1930s advertising world by proving with hard data that consumers are fiercely, unapologetically egocentric. They don't care about your company. They only care about YFM, what's in it for me.
And from there, we looked under the hood of what me actually is. We found the Life Force 8, the ancient, unshakable, biologically hardwired drives for survival, caloric enjoyment, safety from danger, sexual companionship, energy-conserving comfort, tribal superiority, protection of our genetic lineage, and social approval. We learned that these aren't just preferences. They are speeding trains of evolutionary momentum.
We looked at the undeniable proof of this with Emmanuel Haldeman Julius, who showed us that simply changing the label on a product to align with an LF8, like turning the abstract fleece of gold into the biologically charged quest for a blonde mistress, can multiply engagement tenfold without altering the product itself.
We also drew the crucial boundary between those primal drives and our secondary learned wants. We established that while desires for efficiency, dependability, and bargains are nice, they are essentially cognitive luxuries. They will always be abandoned in the proverbial burning building. Because they can never compete with biology, they must always serve as a logical bridge to an underlying LF8.
And finally, we uncovered the mechanism of action. We learned how to activate these drives using the tension-desire-action formula. We saw that by escalating our specificity and using vivid, action-oriented language, we can bypass the analytical brain and install mental movies directly into our customers' minds. We force them to vicariously experience the relief or joy our product provides, creating an unbearable tension that they must resolve.
If we pull all these threads together into one overarching synthesis, the soul of this chapter, and perhaps the soul of effective communication itself, is this. Successful business, marketing, and persuasion do not require you to invent new desires. They do not require you to manipulate people into wanting things they fundamentally don't care about. True influence is simply the art of recognizing the biological, high-speed trains that are already rushing through your customer's mind, and painting such a vivid, undeniable mental movie of your product that they actively, eagerly choose to jump aboard.
It fundamentally changes how you view the world, doesn't it? The next time you see a commercial for a luxury watch, you won't just see a timepiece or a fashion statement. You will see LF8 number 6, the ancient tribal drive to establish superiority. When you see a commercial for a home security system, you won't just see plastic cameras and window sensors. You'll see LF8 number 7, the primal biological panic to protect our loved ones. And far more importantly than just analyzing other people's ads, this changes how you will write every single email, sales pitch, and piece of copy for your own endeavors from this day forward. You are no longer just sharing information, you are navigating human biology.
It gives you a roadmap to human nature, but it also leaves you with a profound challenge. Now that you understand the mechanics, now that you know, you can literally trigger a physical simulation in someone else's mind. Just by your deliberate choice of words, you have to ask yourself a hard question about your own work. What movie is your current business pitch playing in your customer's head right now? When they land on your website or read your email, are you plunging them into a vivid, high-stakes blockbuster that they can't look away from? Or are you just staring at them in the dark while the screen remains completely blank?
That is the perfect question to wrestle with today. Audit your mental movies. But don't worry, we are just getting started on this journey into the depths of consumer psychology. Now that we know what people really want and the biological drives that relentlessly push them, it's time to learn how to ethically structure our arguments to bypass their critical thinking entirely. Join us for our next deep dive as we explore the 17 foundational principles of consumer psychology, moving from what they desire to exactly how they decide. Until then, remember, you're not just selling a product or a feature, you're directing a movie that taps straight into human biology. Make it a masterpiece. Did you know that one single bacteria cell crawling on your kitchen floor right now can explode into more than 8 million cells in less than 24 hours?
Oh, wow. Yeah, 8 million, that is quite a lot.
Right. And that the invisible microbes surrounding you at this very second can cause everything from, athlete's foot to meningitis.
It is genuinely terrifying when you actually stop and think about it.
Exactly. I want you to just let that sit for a moment.
Mm.
Just, look around the room you're in right now.
Think about all the surfaces you've touched today.
Yeah, you are entirely surrounded by a microscopic world of potential threats.
Yep.
And you're probably feeling a little stressed right now, maybe a little itchy.
I know I am, honestly.
Right. You might be experiencing this overwhelming, sudden urge to go grab some bleach and furiously scrub your kitchen counters.
A totally natural reaction, by the way.
But what if I told you that exact feeling of stress, that sudden involuntary spike in your heart rate and your ego's deep biological drive for self-preservation is actually the ultimate secret to why you buy the things you buy?
It really is. And today we are unpacking principle number 1 of consumer psychology from our sources, which is the fear factor.
Or, as it's sometimes called, selling the scare.
Exactly. We're going to explore the underlying psychological and neurological mechanisms that make fear the most potent driver of human action.
And we're also going to detail the 4-step psychological recipe that business owners and entrepreneurs use to instantly break through customer apathy.
Right, because you're going to learn exactly why mastering this specific recipe for ethical, fear-based marketing is absolutely critical for any business.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start by looking at what is actually happening in our brains when we encounter these marketing messages.
Yeah, the biology of it is fascinating.
Because on the surface, selling the scare sounds like a tactic reserved for, like, horror movie trailers.
Right, not something you'd use to sell a mattress or a loaf of bread.
Exactly. But reading through the source material for this deep dive, it becomes incredibly clear that this isn't about inducing sheer paralyzing terror.
No, not at all. It's entirely about stress.
We tend to think of fear as screaming in a haunted house, you know?
Yeah, but in consumer psychology, fear is just a mechanism to introduce a very specific type of biological stress.
And that distinction is crucial, right?
It really is. I mean, if we look at the evolutionary biology of how our brains are wired, fear is not just an arbitrary emotion we feel.
Right.
It is a highly calibrated alarm system. The human ego, and by extension our entire biological operating system, has one continuous overriding imperative.
Self-preservation.
Exactly. Self-preservation. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors survived because their brains developed an incredibly sensitive threat detection system.
So it's hardwired into us.
Completely. When the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear, detects a threat, it doesn't pause to rationally evaluate a spreadsheet of probabilities.
It doesn't sit there and think, well, what are the odds of a tiger actually being in that bush?
Right. It instantly floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. It creates an immediate state of physiological stress.
So everything we do on a primal level is geared towards surviving and protecting ourselves from harm.
Yes. So when an advertisement effectively introduces a fear, it is bypassing your logical frontal cortex entirely.
Wow.
It's speaking directly to that ancient alarm system. It tells the prospect that their self-preservation is currently compromised.
Meaning they're going to be damaged physically, financially, or emotionally?
Right. And when that ancient alarm bell rings, you do not sit still. The stress demands resolution.
Okay, so the brain is basically screaming, do something about this now.
Exactly.
And the sources give us these incredibly vivid examples of how this plays out, not with ancient predators, but with, modern stressors.
Yeah, the everyday things.
Right. Because the brain actually processes the stress of missing out on a massive financial sale, the fear of loss using very similar neural pathways as physical threats.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. Or consider the stress of worrying about your personal safety on a highway. That anxiety is what makes a person suddenly care very deeply about buying the exact right tires for their car.
Oh, for sure.
Or paying a premium to opt for the side curtain airbags in a new vehicle. I mean, you aren't buying a folded piece of nylon and a compressed gas canister when you buy an airbag.
No, definitely not.
You are buying the chemical resolution of the stress that the marketer just induced by having you visualize a car crash.
You are buying a return to baseline peace.
Yes, and we see this principle taken to an almost visceral extreme in the source material with the example of the Bloxam anti-mite mattress cover.
Oh my goodness, yes. That example is so intense.
It really is. The text paints a picture that forces the reader's brain to simulate a highly contaminating threat.
It describes your mattress not as a place of rest, but as a biological nightmare.
It tells the consumer that their bed is infested with millions of microscopic dust mites.
Describing it as the equivalent of an insect's toilet. Covered in oceans of bitter excrement and dead mite bodies.
I have to admit, reading that specific paragraph in the source actually made me want to go wash my sheets in boiling water immediately.
It's so profoundly gross,
It really is.
Yeah.
But looking at it from a psychological perspective, it's a brilliant manipulation of cognitive load.
Oh, absolutely.
By using the phrase insect's toilet, the copywriter forces your brain to visualize it.
Yeah.
You can't unthink that image once it's there.
Nope. It creates a massive, immediate spike of contamination-based stress.
It triggers the disgust response.
Yeah, which is a really powerful subset of our fear circuitry designed to keep us away from pathogens.
Makes sense.
It creates a massive spike of stress. But notice the architecture of the pitch. It doesn't just leave you to wallow in the insect toilet.
Thank goodness.
Right. It immediately presents the resolution. The tightly crafted pores of the Bloxam anti-mite mattress cover.
So suddenly, spending $60 on a mattress cover and $10 a piece on pillowcases isn't evaluated logically as a textile purchase.
Exactly. It bypasses the normal price comparison part of the brain entirely.
It becomes a desperate, non-negotiable necessity for a peaceful night's rest.
The transaction is essentially, hey, give us $70 and we will turn off the disgust alarm currently ringing in your head.
Wow. But wait, I'm looking at this and thinking about the limits of this concept.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, a mattress cover makes total sense because dust mites are a tangible physical trigger, especially for people with allergies.
Right, the path from mites to cover is a straight line.
Exactly. But what about totally mundane, everyday items? The kind of stuff that has absolutely no inherent danger attached to it.
Like what?
Like, does the fear factor apply to a product that is literally the staple of a comforting sandwich, like a loaf of bread?
It does, actually.
Yeah.
And the way the source text addresses the bread example reveals a lot about how fungible fear really is.
Really?
Bread. Yeah, even a loaf of bread can be positioned using fear by shifting the context of the product. Well, the marketer does this by citing scientific studies reporting that refined white flour may be linked to cancer or severe metabolic issues.
Oh, I see.
The moment you introduce that data, the mundane loaf of white bread on the grocery store shelf is no longer just a source of calories.
It represents a covert threat to your biological survival.
Exactly. The advertiser then presents their organic, whole grain, unrefined bread.
Okay.
They don't just sell it as a tastier alternative or even just a healthier one. They position it as the safe choice.
So the product is transformed into a shield.
Precisely.
So the fundamental shift for a business owner listening to this is to stop looking at what their product physically does and start identifying the underlying stress that the product resolves.
That is the key takeaway, yes.
With the bread, you're not selling the whole grain feature, you're selling the resolution of the anxiety regarding your family's long-term health.
You're selling safety.
But this immediately brings up a real-world friction point regarding how we interact with our customers. Isn't this just wildly manipulative, deliberately scaring people just to make a buck?
I'm glad you brought that up.
If the mechanism is this powerful, if we're literally hijacking the amygdala to bypass rational price evaluation, where is the line between being a helpful guide and just holding someone's brain hostage?
That's a valid concern. What's fascinating here is that the line you were talking about is defined entirely by utility and reality.
Okay, explain that.
The sources are very explicit about the practical boundaries of this strategy. Fear-based marketing only functions sustainably and, quite frankly, only avoids severe backlash if the product offers a truly effective solution to a legitimate problem.
So you can't just make things up.
Exactly. If a marketer is conjuring a threat out of thin air or grossly exaggerating a minor issue to sell a product that doesn't actually provide a solution, the strategy collapses.
Consumers aren't stupid. They have a highly attuned secondary radar for deception.
Right. But if the product genuinely quells a real fear and solves a real problem, then inducing that stress is not just acceptable, it is often necessary.
Sorry.
To overcome a psychological phenomenon known as optimism bias.
Okay, optimism bias being the human tendency to assume bad things will happen to other people, but not to us.
Exactly. We walk around assuming our brakes won't fail, our houses won't burn down, and our health will remain perfect.
I mean, we kind of have to, right? Otherwise, we'd be a nervous wreck all the time.
True. This bias keeps us from living in a state of constant panic, but it also makes us dangerously complacent.
So we ignore real maintenance that we should be doing.
Let's look at the mechanic example from the text. A customer brings their car in, and the mechanic notices the brake pads are worn down to a dangerous level.
Okay.
Because of optimism bias, if the mechanic just says, hey, your pads are a bit low, you might want to change them, the customer will likely defer the expense.
They'll just say, I'll get to it next month.
Right. The mechanic actually needs to induce fear. They need to paint a vivid picture of the car being unable to stop on a rainy highway, skidding into an intersection.
Wow. So they have to shatter that optimism bias to protect the customer.
Exactly.
I see. So when the mechanic points out the danger of failing brakes, they aren't being manipulative. They are providing a necessary warning that literally saves lives.
Provided they actually have the high-quality brake pads to fix the problem, yes.
Right. The fear of driving with worn-out brakes is a highly appropriate, rational fear to have.
Right. If the mechanic highlights that danger, induces the stress, and then provides the highly effective solution of replacing those brake pads, That is a perfectly balanced transaction.
The customer trades their money for genuine physical safety and peace of mind.
The same principle applies to life insurance or home smoke detectors.
The threat of a house fire is real.
The devastation of leaving a family financially ruined is real.
Right.
The marketer's job is to bring that latent reality to the forefront of the consumer's mind so they take protective action.
That makes a lot of sense. The threshold is brutal honesty about what you are selling.
Yes.
Does the product genuinely quell a real fear? Does it legitimately protect people, save them money, save them time, or keep them safe?
And if it truly does, the marketer shouldn't shy away from highlighting the danger of not having the product.
But as the source bluntly notes, if the product is a crummy sham that falls apart in a week, psychological tactics won't save the business.
No, it just creates angry customers who realize they've been manipulated.
Which leads us directly into the mechanics of execution. Because simply identifying a real threat and having a good product is not enough to trigger action.
No, it is not enough to simply yell fire in a crowded theater. You have to guide people to the exit.
I like that analogy.
There is a precise scientific formula for executing the fear appeal effectively without causing mass panic or, conversely, complete apathy.
And the sources detail a landmark study by researchers Brett Connis and Aronson.
Yes, which outlines a mandatory 4-step recipe for fear-based messaging.
And the text makes it clear that this isn't a buffet where you can pick and choose the steps.
Not at all.
Leaving out any one of these 4 components is like building a bridge over a canyon, but only building the first half.
That's a great way to picture it.
You march your customer right out over the abyss of anxiety, and if you don't build the second half of the bridge, they just fall into paralysis and shut down.
Exactly. So let's break down this architecture.
What happens in step 1?
Step 1 is the arousal of fear. You must present the threat vividly enough that it triggers that physiological stress response we've been discussing.
It has to be tangible.
It can't be a vague statistic. Saying crime is up 10% engages the logical brain.
Which doesn't trigger the alarm.
Right. Saying a home invasion occurs every 15 seconds, and standard deadbolts can be kicked in with a single blow that engages the amygdala.
You have to scare them sufficiently to shatter their complacency.
Yes.
But the moment you trigger that fear, you have to catch them. Which brings us to step 2.
Which is?
You must offer a specific recommendation for overcoming that fear-aroused threat.
Right. You can't just scare them and leave them hanging with a vague, hey, stay safe out there.
No, you have to point them toward a very specific, actionable path, like install our reinforced steel door frame?
And that leads to step 3, which is where a lot of marketing campaigns fail.
What is step 3?
The recommended action must be perceived as effective for reducing the threat.
Ah, okay. The consumer has to look at your solution and rationally believe that it will actually fix the scary problem.
If your recommendation for surviving a home invasion is buy a louder whistle, the consumer's brain immediately rejects it.
Because a whistle isn't going to stop a guy kicking in your door.
Exactly. The perceived efficacy is too low to neutralize the high level of fear. The solution must logically match the scale of the threat.
And then we hit step 4, which I found to be the most fascinating and arguably the most overlooked part of the entire process.
Self-efficacy.
Right. The message recipient must believe that they personally have the ability to perform the recommended action.
Exactly. To see how these 4 steps interact, let's look at the karate school analogy from the text.
Because it perfectly illustrates the danger of missing step 4.
Yes. Imagine a business owner running a self-defense academy for everyday citizens. Step 1 is presenting the threat, showing sobering, gruesome realities about street muggings or assaults.
You paint a vivid, terrifying picture of walking alone to a car at night. You've successfully aroused the fear.
But here is the trap. If the academy owner just shows a woman those gruesome crime stats and stops there.
Or just says, hey, you need to learn to fight.
Right, they don't motivate her to sign up for karate. They completely paralyze her.
When the brain is presented with overwhelming fear but no achievable path to safety, it defaults to a state of learned helplessness.
The text compares it to a deer staring frozen into the headlights of an oncoming SUV.
Wow, yeah. The deer doesn't run because its brain cannot process a viable escape route in the face of such overwhelming stimulus.
Fear without a viable, achievable path forward just causes cognitive paralysis.
So the academy owner has to move to step 2.
The specific recommendation.
Yeah.
Sign up for our 6-week urban survival self-defense course.
Then comes step 3, establishing perceived efficacy.
Right, so they show video demonstrations of the techniques working in real time.
They feature testimonials from past students who successfully defended themselves.
They prove beyond a shadow of doubt that the system itself is a highly effective countermeasure to the threat of assault.
But we still have a hurdle, don't we?
We do.
The prospect might look at those videos and think, sure, that martial arts system is incredibly effective for a 20-something athlete.
Right.
But I'm a 50-year-old accountant with a bad knee. I could never physically do that.
And if she doesn't believe in her own ability to execute the solution, the sale is lost.
The fear just metastasizes into ambient anxiety.
Precisely. That is why step 4, empowering the recipient, is the linchpin.
The academy owner has to convince the prospect that the solution is within her personal grasp.
They do this by backing up the pitch with credibility boosters and tailored messaging.
They explicitly state, our system requires 0 prior experience and is designed specifically for everyday people to use leverage, not strength, to fight off a larger attacker.
And they offer a free introductory lesson.
That free lesson isn't just a gimmick, is it?
No, it is a psychological tool designed to prove to the prospect that she is physically capable of learning the moves.
Once she executes a move on the mat, her self-efficacy spikes.
That journey from paralysis to empowerment is incredible.
You are taking a prospect who is inherently vulnerable to a threat, forcing them to become hyper-aware of that vulnerability, and then systematically equipping them with both the belief and the physical tool to conquer it.
If the marketer leaves out the empowerment, they aren't marketing. They are just fear-mongering.
The product has to be the vehicle for the customer's empowerment.
But, there's a massive pitfall here regarding what kind of threats we choose to highlight.
Oh, what do you mean?
Let's say a business owner understands the 4 steps perfectly. They know how to scare, recommend, prove efficacy, and empower.
Okay, they've got the recipe down.
The logical next question is, can they just invent a new fear out of thin air, apply the formula, and watch the sales roll in?
Oh, I see. Can they just make up a problem?
Right. The source text is very clear on this point, and it delves into the economics of cognitive bandwidth.
Meaning?
Tapping into an existing fear is entirely different and vastly more profitable than trying to invent a new one.
I love the comparison the sources give to illustrate this, looking at the difference between selling sunscreen and selling a new type of laundry detergent.
Yes, that's a perfect example.
Selling sunscreen using the fear appeal is incredibly straightforward.
Because everyone already knows that the sun can fry your skin.
We've all had a sunburn. Everyone is already aware on a cultural and personal level that severe, repeated sunburns can lead to skin cancer and melanoma.
The fear is already widely recognized and deeply ingrained.
The sunscreen company doesn't have to spend a single dollar educating the public that the sun is a giant, dangerous radiation laser in the sky.
No, they just have to gently remind the consumer of that existing danger and present their SPF 50 spray as the immediate, easy solution.
The cognitive pathway is already paved.
Now, compare that to the challenge of selling a laundry detergent whose primary innovative feature is that it prevents UV damage to clothing.
A marketer might look at the sunscreen success and try to use a similar fear appeal, right?
Yeah, they might say, warning, the invisible rays of the sun are actively destroying the structural integrity of your pants.
But it's an incredibly tough sell.
Why is that?
Because the fear of UV-damaged clothing is not a recognized anxiety. Nobody wakes up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat worrying about sunburned slacks.
It's just not on the radar.
Exactly. To sell that detergent using a fear appeal, the company would have to spend millions of dollars and years of advertising just to construct the cognitive schema for the fear.
They would have to educate the consumer on the microscopic breakdown of fabric.
Prove that it's a financial drain.
And convince them to care about it, all before they could even begin to introduce the detergent as the solution.
It is a massive waste of marketing capital trying to educate a market on a fear they don't inherently possess.
So the rule is, don't try to build a new river, just build your mill on a river that is already flowing.
I like that. But what about fears that aren't actively on people's minds every single day, but are kind of simmering under the surface?
Oh, latent fears?
Yeah. The text brings up the history of Purell hand sanitizer, which is a fascinating case study in mapping those psychological rivers.
Purell is a masterclass in tapping into a latent fear.
Because J.O. Joe Industries introduced Purell to the food service and healthcare industries back in 1988.
Right. At that time, it was an industrial product for people who had to have sterile hands for professional reasons.
The general public in the late 80s and early 90s wasn't walking around constantly terrified of touching doorknobs or ATM buttons or shaking hands.
People washed their hands before dinner, of course, but there wasn't this ambient, constant panic about public germs in everyday life.
The need to keep your hands chemically, perfectly germ-free 24/7 just wasn't part of the cultural consciousness.
But, and this is the genius part, the underlying latent fear of illness, contamination, and the invisible microscopic world has always been hardwired into human biology.
We are evolutionarily primed to fear what can make us sick.
Exactly. Purell didn't invent the fear of germs.
I simply took a product out of the commercial world, put it in a tiny, convenient, brightly colored bottle, and tapped into that dormant anxiety.
They ran campaigns that brought the invisible threat of the microbe, much like that rapidly multiplying bacteria on the kitchen floor we talked about at the start, to the absolute forefront of the consumer's daily awareness.
They activated the latent fear.
And by doing so, they completely shifted cultural behavior.
They created a world where people actually feel a sudden spike of panic and vulnerability if they realize they forgot their little bottle of alcohol gel on their keychain before going into a grocery store.
They successfully rode the wave of an existing, albeit previously dormant, human anxiety.
The practical takeaway for anyone listening who is creating a message is profound.
It really is.
Yeah.
You have to look for the anxieties that are already native to your customer's mind.
Find the stress they already carry, whether it's active or latent, and position your product as the release valve for that specific pressure.
I want to shift gears slightly because when we talk about fear, we default to thinking about bodily harm, disease, crime, or literal car crashes.
But physical danger.
But there is a much more subtle, ubiquitous form of fear that we are all exposed to multiple times a day.
Oh, what kind?
That doesn't look like a horror movie, but it triggers the exact same stress pathways in the brain.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It is entirely based on the fear of missing out, and the psychological mechanism is scarcity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Scarcity leverages a cognitive bias known as loss aversion, doesn't it?
Yes. Studies in behavioral economics consistently show that the psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
We are wired to guard against loss.
Scarcity acts as the ultimate deadline. It weaponizes that fear of loss to combat what the source material refers to as human inertia.
Human inertia being the natural laziness of the buyer.
Exactly. If a body at rest tends to stay at rest, a wallet closed tends to stay closed.
That's a great way to put it.
If a consumer believes that a product will always be available, sitting on the shelf at the exact same price, whenever they eventually get around to wanting it, they will defer the decision.
Because the brain wants to conserve energy. So if a decision can be postponed without consequence, it will be postponed indefinitely.
Scarcity introduces a consequence.
I think about how many times I've left something in an online shopping cart for weeks.
We all do it.
I look at it, decide I want it, but I just don't pull the trigger because there's no pressure.
Right.
But the second I log in and see a little red text that says, only 2 left in stock or flash sale ends in 43 minutes, my heart rate actually goes up.
The inertia shatters.
It really does. The text points out these everyday slogans we hear constantly: limited offer, one-day sale, while supplies last.
We hear them so often they seem like background noise, but they are highly calibrated triggers.
They're deeply rooted in reactance theory, right?
Yes. Reactance occurs when a person feels that someone or something is taking away their choices or limiting the range of alternatives.
So when a marketer says, while supplies last, they are threatening the consumer's freedom of choice.
They are creating a scenario where if the consumer doesn't act immediately, the choice to buy the product will be permanently taken away from them.
And people hate that. The consumer isn't just buying the product to get the product. They are buying the product to assert their freedom and prevent the painful loss of the opportunity.
Nobody likes having their choices taken away. It's a very primal reaction.
For a business owner, understanding the necessity of the deadline is non-negotiable.
Absolutely. If you don't give the buyer a concrete reason to act now, the threat dissipates.
The stress of the fear appeal evaporates into the ether, and the customer wanders away.
You have to give them a window of opportunity that is visibly and actively closing.
Because the closing window forces the brain to prioritize the purchasing decision over whatever other cognitive tasks it was handling.
If we pull all these threads together into a single, cohesive understanding, the soul of this chapter is the realization that fear is not a magic wand.
No, it's not.
You cannot just scream at a customer, show them a terrifying image, and expect them to hand over their money.
Fear is simply a psychological door opener.
Yes, it creates the necessary biological tension and stress, the physiological imperative to take action.
But the fear is useless and potentially harmful without the framework.
It is your clear, credible, and achievable solution, delivered meticulously through the four-step empowerment process, tapping into their existing native anxieties, and bounded by the urgency of a scarcity deadline that actually closes the sale,
The product must be the hero that rescues the customer from the stress you've highlighted.
bringing them back to a state of baseline peace and safety.
It's an incredibly powerful tool set.
It really is.
You now understand how to ethically use stress to grab attention, bypass human inertia, and drive immediate empowered action.
You know how to take that terrifying, multiplying microscopic bacteria on the kitchen floor and use it to offer your customer a legitimate, proven shield of safety.
But what if the secret to your next massive breakthrough isn't about scaring your customer at all?
Oh.
What if instead the most powerful psychological lever you can pull is flattering them so deeply and appealing to their sense of identity so perfectly that they buy your product just to prove to the world how amazing they are?
That sounds like a whole different game.
It is. Keep that exact thought in mind as you look toward our next deep dive into the strange, flattering, and highly lucrative world of egomorphing.
Have you ever considered that every time you pull out your credit card, you might not just be buying a product, but actually purchasing a piece of a new personality to cover up your own hidden inadequacies?
I mean, it is a pretty startling premise to just drop on someone, but when we rigorously examine the deepest principles of consumer psychology, we actually find that our wallets are inextricably tied to our egos.
Right.
Like, the things we buy are very rarely just utility items. They function as psychological mirrors.
I was actually thinking about this exact thing the other day, when I saw my neighbor hauling this, it was a $400 military-grade bear-proof cooler.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he's dragging it into his perfectly manicured suburban backyard just to keep, a few juice boxes and light beers cold.
Right, he's not traversing the tundra.
Exactly. He's standing on a patio. But when he buys that specific cooler, he isn't really buying polyurethane insulation, is he? He's buying the idea that he could survive in the wilderness. He's purchasing a rugged identity.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the mechanism at play here. He is experiencing this subtle, perhaps entirely unconscious tension between his comfortable domestic reality and, a latent desire for rugged self-reliance.
Yeah.
And that specific cooler acts as the psychological bridge resolving that tension.
Which brings us directly to the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring principle number 2 of consumer psychology, which is egomorphing or instant identification.
It's a fascinating concept.
It really is. You are about to learn how the world's most successful ad agencies just, bypass logical arguments entirely by turning their products into those exact mirrors we just talked about.
Mirrors that reflect your ideal self.
Exactly. So if you are interested in business, entrepreneurship, or you just want to decode your own purchasing habits, mastering this concept is crucial. Tapping into a customer's identity is infinitely more powerful than simply listing out a product's features.
Oh, absolutely. And we are really looking at moving completely beyond the physical utility of an item here.
Right.
To ground this, we have to look at the foundational theory presented by researchers Anthony Praetkonis and Elliot Aronson in their 1991 work, Age of Propaganda.
Okay, Age of Propaganda.
Yeah, and they crystallized this phenomenon by proposing that consumers purchase the quote-unquote right stuff to enhance their own egos and to rationalize away their perceived inadequacies.
Rationalize away inadequacy.
Right. The core concept of egomorphing suggests that a consumer associates so closely with a product's carefully crafted image that this image actually merges with their own identity.
Wait, so the consumer's ego literally shapeshifts?
Yes. It morphs to fit the psychological mold provided by the brand.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the mechanics here, let's look at one of the most famous examples of this in history, right? The Marlboro Man.
Oh, the classic example.
Because before that campaign, Marlboro was actually positioned as a women's cigarette, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It had a completely different image.
But then they pivot. They introduced the cowboy, the horse, the lasso, the wide open plains.
The whole rugged aesthetic.
Right. And when a mid-century office worker living in a cramped city apartment decides to switch to that brand, it's not because the tobacco suddenly tastes better.
Yo, not all.
He is sitting in a cubicle,
Yeah.
feeling perhaps trapped or, emasculated by modern corporate life.
Precisely. And the genius of that campaign was recognizing that specific, widespread psychological deficit among urban men at the time.
The deficit of feeling untamed.
Exactly. The cigarette itself is functionally identical to a dozen others on the market. But the brand becomes a delivery mechanism for a psychological trait.
Rugged independence.
Yes, in this case, rugged, untamed independence.
I want to push back on something here, though, or rather maybe refine how we think about this.
Sure, go ahead.
Because when people casually use the phrase retail therapy, they usually just mean treating themselves to a nice sweater because they had a stressful week.
Right, a little reward.
Yeah. But based on Pratkhanis and Aronson's framework, are they actually self-medicating a specific psychological gap? Like, are they patching a literal hole in their self-esteem with a physical object?
Well, partially yes. But the term self-medicating implies that it is purely an internal closed loop, you know?
Like they just want to feel better internally.
Exactly. But what the psychology actually suggests is that egomorphing is highly performative.
Performative? How so?
They want the outside world to see the cure just as much as they want to feel it internally. You are diagnosing a feeling of inadequacy, maybe powerlessness, feeling unattractive, feeling unaccomplished, and you are prescribing a product explicitly marketed to project power, beauty, or success to the external world.
Oh, wow. Okay, that performative aspect completely shifts the analogy for me. It's not just putting a bandage on a wound.
No, it's much more active than that.
It makes me think of a chameleon.
A chameleon. I like where this is going.
Yeah, because a chameleon doesn't just change colors to hide, right? It changes colors to signal to other animals.
Right, communication.
It can project that it belongs to a more dangerous species, or that it's dominant, or that it's ready to mate. The color change is a biological signal to the outside world that fundamentally alters how the chameleon feels about its own position in the environment.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
You think?
Absolutely. The chameleon's shifting pigment is the product. The dominance or safety it projects is the psychological trait the advertiser has attached to it.
Okay, yeah.
And the crucial takeaway for you as someone operating a business or building a brand is to recognize that you are rarely just selling a physical item or a service.
You are selling that pigment.
Exactly. You are selling the ability to signal. If you want to leverage egomorphing, you first have to identify what inadequacy your target market might be feeling deep down.
What color do they desperately want to project?
Right. And once you know that, you position your product as the ultimate immediate way to project that exact trait.
But wait, if I'm a marketer, that introduces a pretty significant scalability problem, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, human beings are incredibly complex. We all have different insecurities. If the whole foundation of egomorphing is filling an inadequacy, how do advertisers know what trait to project to get a mass audience to bite?
That's a fair question.
Are they just blindly throwing darts at a board of human insecurities and hoping one hits?
They absolutely are not guessing. And the reason they don't have to guess is that society has already done the heavy lifting for them.
Society has.
Yes. Society has pre-wired a specific set of desires into all of us. This brings us to the mechanics of balance theory.
Okay, balance theory.
Yeah, which was explored deeply by researchers Steck and Bernstein in 1999.
I want to spend some time here because the name itself implies an equation. Balance theory. What exactly is balancing what?
To understand balance theory, you have to look at the psychological tension, the imbalance created when a person's actual self doesn't match their ideal self.
Actual self versus ideal self.
Right. The ego constructs a narrative of who we should be. But reality constantly provides feedback on who we actually are.
And usually, those don't line up perfectly.
Exactly. When the actual falls short of the ideal, there is a psychological deficit. This is cognitive dissonance. It is a deeply uncomfortable state of imbalance.
So the scale is tipped in the wrong direction. The ego is in pain because reality isn't matching the fantasy.
Exactly. And balance theory reveals that purchasing a specific type of product acts as the psychological weight that restores equilibrium to the ego scale.
Wow.
But Stellick and Bernstein found that this doesn't work with just any random trait.
It has to be specific.
Right. Egomorphing is most spectacularly successful when it zeroes in on characteristics society universally deems desirable.
And what are those?
We are talking about 4 main pillars: physical attractiveness, intelligence, economic success, and sexual prowess.
So because no matter who you are or where you live, society has relentlessly programmed you to believe that having those 4 things equals survival and status.
Exactly. Advertisers don't invent these desires. If an advertiser aligns their product with one of these four pre-wired pillars, they aren't trying to create a new psychological drive from scratch.
Right, they're tapping into something ancient.
They are simply offering an easy route to fulfill a drive that has existed since the dawn of human social structures.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the true genius of balance theory is its two-pronged reality. It explains why a single image appeals to entirely different types of people.
How so? Different types of people reacting to the same image.
Because the scale can be balanced in two different ways. On one hand, you have people who already possess these desirable traits.
Okay.
They buy the product to publicly flaunt their ego. They use the product as an amplifier. They are saying, look at me, I have achieved this status, and this product is proof.
Right, so if I am already a highly successful executive, I buy the bespoke Italian suit, not to hide my failure, but to amplify my existing success.
Precisely.
I'm adding weight to the ideal side of the scale to push it even higher.
Exactly. But on the other hand, and this is where it gets incredibly potent, you have the people who don't possess these traits.
The people whose scales are deeply imbalanced in the negative.
Yes. They buy the exact same products in a desperate attempt to appear as if they do. They use the product as a bridge to cross over into the identity they desire.
Amplifiers and bridges.
Exactly. Whether a consumer is flaunting a success or masking a perceived failure, the ego-morphing mechanism is identical.
Let's look at how this plays out in reality, because this is fascinating. Think about those iconic Victoria's Secret commercials.
Oh, perfect example.
You have these sweeping cinematic shots of models with perfect hair, piercing eyes, walking with absolute confidence in lacy garments.
Right.
When consumers are watching that and deciding to buy, they aren't analyzing the thread count of the lace, or admiring the high-definition cinematography.
No, not at all.
They're buying into the pre-wired societal ideal of physical attractiveness and sexual prowess.
Yeah. And look at how balance theory applies there. For the consumer who already feels highly attractive and confident, purchasing the lingerie is an amplifier of their existing self-image.
They're turning up the volume on what they already have.
Yes. But for the consumer who feels profoundly insecure about their physical attractiveness, the lingerie acts as a bridge.
A psychological patch.
Exactly. It is designed to correct the imbalance they feel when they look in the mirror. The advertiser doesn't need to know which of those two categories the buyer falls into.
Because the imagery works flawlessly for both.
Exactly.
So the practical application for you, the listener, is a massive shift in how you write your marketing copy.
A total paradigm shift.
You need to stop wasting your time trying to logically convince a prospect that they should want to be successful or that they should want to be attractive.
They already want those things.
Right. You don't need to sell them on the concept of the desire. You need to identify which of the four pillars, attractiveness, intelligence, economic success, or sexual prowess, your product best aligns with.
And make your product the frictionless vehicle for that ambition.
Exactly.
Like if you are selling an online coding boot camp, you aren't really selling Python syntax.
Nobody wants to buy syntax.
Right. You are selling the pillar of intelligence and economic success. You are selling the ego morph of becoming a highly paid, highly respected tech professional.
But wait, if the desire is already pre-wired into our brains, and the customer is just looking for a vehicle to balance their psychological scale, that changes the entire nature of persuasion.
It absolutely does.
If I'm not trying to convince you with logic, and I already know what you secretly want, do I even need to formulate a rational argument? Like, do I even need words?
That is the brilliant and, for some, the most unsettling conclusion of this principle.
Unsettling is the right word.
Because ego morphing taps into such an innate, powerful sense of vanity and social survival, advertisers can completely abandon traditional logical frameworks.
They just drop logic entirely.
Completely. They don't need to present scientific evidence or cost-benefit analyses or a list of rational reasons to buy.
Right.
Instead, they concentrate purely on showing prospects the exact images their egos are desperate to see.
Just pure, unfiltered aspiration.
Completely unfiltered. And this is why, when you look at advertising for absolute top-tier luxury goods, you will see almost zero persuasive copy.
You just see the logo in a moody photograph?
Exactly. You won't see bullet points detailing the durability of the stitching. They rely entirely on what we call feel-good or pure image advertising.
Right.
To understand why this works, we have to briefly mention the foundational biological desires. These are sometimes referred to in consumer psychology as the Life Force 8.
Okay, let's define that because that sounds like a sci-fi movie title. What are the Life Force 8?
They are the 8 biologically programmed desires that drive all human behavior.
All of it.
Pretty much. They include the drive for survival, the enjoyment of food, freedom from fear and pain, sexual companionship, comfortable living conditions, the drive to be superior or to win, the care of loved ones, and social approval.
Okay, so when advertisers use pure imagery, they are bypassing the logical brain entirely and firing a direct signal to one of those 8 biological drives.
You've got it.
And the example that perfectly illustrates targeting the drive to be quote-unquote superior is the legendary print ad showdown between Rolls-Royce and Mercedes.
Oh, that is a masterclass.
Let's dissect this frame by frame because it's brilliant at bypassing logic.
Okay.
So imagine opening a high-end financial magazine. You turn the page and see a full-page spread.
Okay.
It's a bird's-eye view looking down at a Manhattan intersection. Sitting at the red light is a ridiculously shiny black Rolls-Royce convertible.
Right.
Right on the hood is the iconic Spirit of Ecstasy silver mascot, leaning forward into the wind. Behind the wheel is a 55-year-old executive. Impeccable suit, salt and pepper hair. But it's his posture that matters.
The posture is everything.
He looks incredibly relaxed. He exudes a quiet, unbothered superiority. He completely owns the world.
The visual framing of his relaxation is key. It signals absolute security in his status.
Exactly. But here is the critical detail. Pulled up right next to him at the light is a guy driving a Mercedes.
A Mercedes?
And the guy in the Mercedes has his head resting in his hand, and he is squirming uncomfortably. He is staring with pure, unfiltered envy at the Rolls-Royce driver. And as the analysis points out, match point, game over.
It is a surgically precise piece of psychological warfare.
Warfare is a good word for it.
And notice the choice of the secondary car. Why a Mercedes?
Because it's already a luxury car.
Exactly. Because a Mercedes is universally recognized as a symbol of immense economic success. By showing a Mercedes driver someone who is already in the top percentile of wealth, squirming with envy.
The ad establishes the Rolls-Royce driver as existing in a stratosphere of absolute untouchable supremacy.
Right. It creates a new ceiling of status.
I can hear a skeptic listening to this and thinking, isn't this just blatantly manipulative? It's kind of snotty.
People definitely have that reaction.
Right. Like, does it really work to just show a picture of someone looking smug and someone else looking jealous? Where are the engine specs? Where is the 0 to 60 time?
It works flawlessly precisely because it ignores the 0 to 60 time.
It doesn't even engage with the logic.
No. When a true prospect looks at that ad, someone who has the financial means and the underlying biological drive for ultimate superiority and social approval, they don't care about the engine block.
The cognitive dissonance we discussed earlier flares up.
Exactly. They look at the relaxed executive in the Rolls-Royce, and their ego instantly wants to morph into that exact state of unbothered supremacy.
They don't want to buy a car. They want to buy the ability to make another rich person jealous.
Yes. The ad taps directly into that biological drive to win, to obliterate the competition.
It's primal.
It really is. The image alone triggers what psychologists call the peripheral route of persuasion.
The peripheral.
Right. The consumer doesn't critically analyze the car's mechanics. They simply absorb the visual cue of ultimate status.
So the ego takes the driver's seat.
Literally and figuratively. And the logical brain is just dragged along for the ride, forced to come up with rational justifications for the purchase after the emotional decision has already been made.
Oh, well, British engineering is just superior. Yeah.
Exactly. They invent the logic later.
Which gives us an incredibly clear takeaway. If your product is a premium offering, a luxury good, or a high-ticket service, you have to stop trying to justify your price tag with an exhaustive list of technical specs.
Yes, please stop doing that.
Stop writing manuals and start painting pictures. Your marketing should focus entirely on the aspirational imagery that shows the consumer the ultimate end state of how they will feel, and more importantly, how others will look at them when they own your product.
You let the image do the heavy lifting of balancing their psychological scale. The ego will invent the logical reasons to justify handing over the credit card.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Painting a picture of an unbothered millionaire in a Rolls-Royce makes perfect sense for a global luxury brand that has spent a century building cultural cachet. But what if you don't have that kind of budget or history? Say our listener runs a local everyday business.
Right, the everyday entrepreneur.
Yeah, they own a landscaping company, a bakery, or a neighborhood martial arts studio. How do you manufacture prestige out of thin air without looking completely ridiculous?
It is the most important question for the everyday entrepreneur, and the answer is that you don't have to manufacture the prestige yourself.
You don't.
No, you borrow it.
Borrow it.
Well, the Rolls-Royce ad is the high-gloss, billion-dollar version of ego morphing. The core mechanism applies to any local business.
How does that work?
You simply have to associate your everyday product with symbols, groups, or individuals in your local community that possess the ego-enhancing qualities your prospect aspires to.
So we are back to the chameleon analogy.
Exactly.
If the local business doesn't have the pigment to signal dominance on its own, it has to stand next to something that does and let the color bleed over.
That's a great way to visualize it. You provide an accessible link to an aspirational identity.
Let's run this through some of the local business scenarios to see how the mechanics hold up. Let's take the neighborhood karate school.
Okay, the dojo.
Yeah. A logical marketer would say, sell the benefits. Self-defense, cardiovascular health, discipline for your kids. But how does ego morphing change that pitch?
Because every single karate school in a 50-mile radius sells self-defense and discipline. It's a commodity.
Right.
To use ego morphing, you pivot. You spotlight the fact that professional, famous, mixed martial arts fighters train at your specific facility.
Even if it's just occasionally.
Right. And you print high-quality T-shirts for your amateur students that proudly state, I train with insert MMA star's name.
Oh, I see the mechanism perfectly now.
Do you?
Yeah.
You-
If I'm a 40-year-old accountant who sits under fluorescent lights looking at spreadsheets all day, my actual self is very domestic, very safe.
Safe, predictable.
But my ideal self, tapping into that biological drive for physical prowess and freedom from fear, my ideal self wants to feel dangerous.
Yeah.
When I go to that gym and wear that shirt to the grocery store, my ego is morphing. I am borrowing the rugged, elite, physically dominant aura of a professional cage fighter just by paying my $100 monthly gym membership.
Precisely. You are no longer just a guy taking an exercise class on a Tuesday night.
No, I'm part of the fight camp.
You are signaling to the world that you are part of an elite fighting culture. Your ego's scale is balanced.
That is so powerful. Let's look at another one. The expensive local dog groomer.
Right. If you are the most expensive dog groomer in town, you are going to lose if you try to logically justify your premium pricing by explaining the chemical composition of your organic dog shampoo.
Nobody cares about the shampoo.
Nobody cares. Instead, you become the explicitly snooty groomer.
The snooty groomer, I love that.
You curate an image. You show photos of the wealthiest, most recognizable local celebrities stepping out of high-end vehicles with their perfectly groomed poodles at your storefront.
Okay.
The implicit message is, I only trust this specific groomer with my purebred.
And let's analyze why that works on the average middle-class pet owner. Why does someone with a moderate income stretch their budget to go to the snooty groomer?
Why do you think?
Because by taking their golden retriever to the exact same place the local elite go, they are signaling to the world and confirming to themselves that they possess the taste and resources to belong in that upper echelon of society.
Exactly. They are purchasing a slice of economic success and status by proxy.
It's retail therapy for the human, completely masked as a spa day for the dog.
Exactly what it is.
The dog doesn't care. The dog just wants to roll in the mud. The owner's ego cares. The owner's ego is morphing through the dog's haircut.
It is proxy status, yes.
There is one more example from the text that I think highlights the subtle power of this. The local security firm.
Yes.
Let's call them Fort Knox Security. How do they use borrowed prestige?
By heavily emphasizing a very specific segment of their client list.
Not just their total numbers.
Right. They don't just say, we have 500 local customers. They run targeted marketing that asks a highly specific question. Why do more local bank presidents and jewelry store owners choose Fort Knox Security to protect their own homes than anyone else?
Now wait, if I'm an average homeowner in a subdivision, why does that specific phrasing work on me? Like, I don't own a bank. I don't have a vault full of loose diamonds in my basement. The logical need for security is totally different.
It works because of the implied standard of absolute excellence.
Okay, break that down.
Think about the psychological tension. A bank president or a jewelry store owner has massive, tangible assets to protect. Their standard for security is understandably assumed to be the highest in the city.
Because they have the most to lose.
Right. So if those individuals, people of extreme wealth and discerning judgment, trust this specific firm with their lives and property,
The average homeowner feels an immense ego boost by hiring the exact same firm.
Yeah.
It elevates the modest homeowner. It essentially tells them, my 3-bedroom house is my castle, and I protect my family with the exact same elite forces that billionaires use.
it taps right back into that Life Force 8 drive.
The care and protection of loved ones.
Combined with the drive to feel superior.
Right, exactly. It validates their self-worth.
But, and this is a crucial nuance we absolutely must explore, there is a very real danger here for the listener if they attempt to apply this clumsily.
Okay, this is idle. Let's talk about the danger. How does it backfire? What happens when the chameleon puts on the wrong colors?
If a brand tries to borrow authority or prestige from an elite group, but the everyday consumer sees through the illusion, the cognitive dissonance actually reverses and attacks the brand.
Ouch. Reverses and attacks. Give me an example.
Let's go back to the karate dojo example.
Okay.
If you claim that elite MMA fighters train at your gym, but a prospective student walks in and the facility is dilapidated, the equipment is broken, and it's clear no professional athlete has ever set foot in there.
The prospect feels patronized.
Exactly. The illusion shatters.
And not only does it shatter, but the consumer's ego recoils. Nobody wants to feel like a fool who fell for a cheap trick.
Right, because if they wear that t-shirt and someone asks them about the MMA fighter and they have to awkwardly admit they've never actually seen him, their social status drops.
The product fails to deliver the promised ego morph, and the brand loses all trust.
Permanently.
So the prestige you borrow has to be authentic. The bank presidents actually have to use your security firm.
Yes.
The wealthy clients actually have to bring their dogs to your groomer. You can't just fabricate the association out of thin air.
No, you have to highlight an association that legitimately exists and then amplify it so the average consumer can participate in it.
You are inviting the everyday consumer into an exclusive club that actually exists. You're just opening the side door for them.
Precisely.
So if we pull all these threads together, from the Marlboro Man's open plains to the unbothered executive in the Rolls-Royce, down to the local karate dojo, what is the ultimate distillation of this principle for our listener?
The soul of this concept is that people simply do not buy products.
They don't.
They buy a reflection of their ideal selves. Whether a consumer is trying to desperately bridge a gap to mask a deep-seated inadequacy or they are loudly flaunting a hard-earned success, your product is never the main event.
Right.
Your product is merely the prop they use to stage their identity to the external world.
A prop.
Yes. And mastering egomorphing requires a fundamental, almost uncomfortable shift in your perspective as a marketer or a business owner.
What's the shift?
You have to stop obsessing over what your product physically does and shift your entire focus toward who your product makes the buyer feel they are.
It all comes back to the mirror.
It always does.
So the next time you, the listener, are standing in a store or scrolling online and you feel that sudden irresistible urge to buy a specific brand over a functionally identical competitor, I want you to pause.
Take a breath.
Yeah, take a hard look in the psychological mirror and ask yourself a slightly uncomfortable question. What specific inadequacy is my ego secretly trying to morph right now?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. Am I buying this heavy-duty jacket because it provides superior thermal insulation? Or because I want the people at the coffee shop to think I'm an avid outdoorsman?
Right.
Am I buying this watch to accurately track time or to signal to my coworkers that I am ascending the corporate ladder faster than they are?
You have to be honest with yourself.
Being honest about that answer will instantly make you a far sharper consumer and a profoundly more brilliant marketer.
It is a powerful realization.
Truly.
And, once you truly understand how to morph a consumer's ego using their own internal pre-wired vanity, you might start wondering about external forces.
Like external force?
Yeah. Like what happens when you don't just appeal to their internal desires, but you actually borrow authority from trusted, established institutions to make the consumer instantly, unquestioningly believe your claim.
Oh, that sounds dangerous.
It is, and we will uncover exactly how to wield that kind of institutional power in the next chapter. Imagine for a second that you have just crafted the absolute perfect product.
Oh, the dream scenario.
Right. The absolute dream. You've spent, I don't know, months, maybe even years, just agonizing over every single micro detail of the design.
Right. The user experience is totally flawless.
Exactly. Flawless. And you've priced it at a point that, on paper, should make it a completely irresistible proposition for anybody.
A no-brainer.
A total no-brainer. You've even run the data, you've targeted the exact right audience down to their highly specific browsing habits, so the entire marketing infrastructure is pristine.
Pristine. Okay, so what goes wrong?
Well, you hit launch,
Yeah.
and you sit there waiting for the dashboard to light up, and it's just nothing, complete silence.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
It really is, because
Right.
the data shows people are actually seeing the campaign, right? They're clicking, they're looking at the page, but your conversion rate is, functionally zero.
Yeah.
And you were just left staring at the screen wondering, what structural failure occurred here? And the answer is usually completely invisible.
Because it's a failure of trust.
Exactly. It's a failure of the single most critical ingredient in human commerce. It's just that, well, nobody believes you.
Yeah. And it is the ultimate blind spot for creators and businesses today.
It really is.
Because there's this assumption, right? This assumption that a well-engineered argument or a beautifully presented set of facts just has this inherent gravitational pull.
Like the facts should just speak for themselves.
Right, but the source materials you're looking at today clearly shows that if that underlying psychological architecture of trust is missing,
Yeah.
the most compelling factual presentation you can come up with simply disintegrates on impact,
Right.
just shatters.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are unpacking principle number 3 from our source material on consumer psychology.
A very exciting one.
Oh, absolutely. It's this concept defined as transfer, or what the author calls credibility by osmosis.
I love that phrase.
So good. Right. Over the next bit of our conversation, we're going to look at how you can ethically borrow trust from established institutions. We'll get into why the human brain uses, these specific heuristic shortcuts to bypass extreme skepticism.
And how you can actually apply these mechanisms to make sure your work is perceived as legitimate.
Exactly. So if you are operating a business, launching a project, or even just trying to persuade an audience of something, understanding this psychological lever is just essential. It's how you convert isolated value into an actual transaction.
Yeah, and before we really get into it, we need to heavily underscore the baseline state of the consumer in this scenario,
Okay, set the stage for us.
which is this state of profound, almost biological skepticism. Like when you enter the marketplace, you aren't stepping onto a neutral playing field.
Right, they aren't just waiting to hear your pitch.
Not at all. You are stepping into an environment where the default cognitive stance of your audience is to treat your claims as a potential threat to their resources.
That's a great way to frame it. And the source material illustrates this beautifully with a story about an advertiser who was hitting this exact wall, this paralysis.
Oh, the one with the textbook perfect campaign?
Yeah, the textbook campaign. So this person executed an ad that was on paper flawless, like high quality imagery, super frictionless ordering process, and they placed it in a publication with massive, highly relevant circulation.
And the product itself was actually good, right?
They were-
Genuinely efficacious.
It was. The product worked, yet the campaign yielded absolutely nothing. Zero. So this advertiser is completely bewildered, looking at the metrics and asking, why is the market rejecting a mathematically sound proposition?
And the text is pretty brutal in its assessment of that.
It is so brutal. It basically says the market simply did not believe the source of the information, period.
Which really just highlights this fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain processes commercial information. Well, the advertiser assumed that presenting the utility of the product,
Yeah.
like showing how useful it is, was the exact same thing as proving its reality.
Oh, interesting.
Right. But the moment any entity, and like a corporation, a solo founder, a politician, whoever, the moment they make a self-interested claim, the audience's critical defense mechanisms just slam into gear
The shields go up.
instantly. It is an involuntary cognitive reflex. The brain is literally designed to prevent exploitation.
Let's look at the mechanics of that failure for a second, because it really is like a structural engineering problem.
Okay, I like this.
Think about it like you're building a massive state-of-the-art facility, like $1 million mansion.
Right.
You can fill it with all the value in the world, marble floors, gold fixtures, whatever. But if you haven't laid down the fiber optic cables of trust to connect it to the outside world, or even just a paved road to the front door, the signal can't travel.
Right. The customer just physically cannot get to the value.
Exactly. The consumer's brain literally cannot compute the value because the transmission line of credibility is severed. So all that amazing value remains totally quarantined behind this giant wall of doubt.
Quarantine, that's a really good word for it.
Yeah, and the text actually refers to this specific space, this gap between the product's actual value and the consumer's willingness to accept that value. It calls it the belief gap.
The belief gap. Yeah, that structural analogy is highly accurate.
Yeah.
Because the brain uses credibility as a mandatory preliminary filter.
Like a toll booth.
Yes. Before it will even allocate the cognitive resources necessary to look at your features and benefits, it has to pass that filter. I mean, evolutionarily, we are wired for loss aversion.
Right. We hate losing things more than we like gaining things.
Exactly. So when an advertisement asks a consumer to exchange capital, their hard-earned money, for a promised future benefit, the amygdala just flags it.
The amygdala being the threat detection center of the brain.
Right. The internal calculus happens in a millisecond. It goes, if I surrender my resources and this claim turns out to be false, my survival standing is diminished.
Wow. So it's that deep. It's not just, I don't want to waste $50. It's, I am risking my survival.
Exactly. The belief gap isn't an insult to the product. It's a necessary protective moat that the consumer built to survive.
So the immediate implication for you, listening to this deep dive right now, is that you need to run a diagnostic on how you are presenting your ideas or products.
For sure.
Like, are you just stockpiling value on your side of the moat? Are you endlessly listing features and just assuming the sheer weight of the facts will eventually force the customer to believe you?
Because it won't.
It won't. You have to ask, are you actively engineering a bridge over that skepticism? Because if you are the only person testifying to your own brilliance, the consumer's brain automatically discounts the testimony.
It has to. It's inherent bias.
Yeah.
Self-declared credibility is basically an oxymoron in the marketplace.
Right. I'm the best, just ask me.
Exactly. To bridge that gap, you require a third-party mechanism. You need this verifiable external signal that bypasses that threat detection system we just talked about.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the psychological principle of transfer becomes operational.
Yes.
So the text defines transfer as the strategic use of symbols or images or ideas that are culturally associated with respected individuals, groups, or institutions.
So taking something people already trust.
Exactly. By placing these symbols in proximity to your product, you are effectively siphoning off their established authority and just routing it directly into your own offering.
Like plugging into their power grid.
Yes. It is a pure process of cognitive association.
And to really understand the neurological underpinning of this, we kind of have to look at how we process cultural authority in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack that.
The source material roots this heavily in the concept of socialization.
Socialization.
Right? From childhood, human beings are subjected to these continuous socialization processes. We are trained to defer to specific institutional structures.
Like who?
Well, the scientific community, the medical establishment, governmental regulatory bodies, academia.
The church, right.
The church, exactly. These entities have accumulated vast reserves of unquestioned authority over generations.
Decades, centuries even.
Right. So we are conditioned from a very young age to associate their specific symbols like a crest, a uniform, a seal of approval with safety and validity.
But hold on, let me challenge the mechanics of this for a moment, because we are talking about highly complex financial or personal decisions here, right?
So,
Is the cognitive architecture really that easily bypassed? It just seems kind of counterintuitive that a modern, rational consumer, someone who might, I don't know, rigorously research a car purchase for weeks, would suddenly lower their drawbridge just because a tiny pixelated logo of a medical association is sitting next to a product.
It sounds absurd when you put it that way.
Right. Does proximity to a symbol genuinely override the prefrontal cortex's ability to analyze the actual data?
It is a phenomenal question. And the tension you are pointing out right there is exactly why this principle is so heavily studied in behavioral economics.
So what's the verdict?
The answer is yes. It frequently overrides deep analysis.
Wow.
But not because the brain is being tricked or because it's malfunctioning. It happens because the brain is highly, highly motivated to conserve metabolic energy.
Conserve energy.
Okay. Psychologists divide persuasion processing into two distinct routes. We have the central route and the peripheral route.
Okay, let's break those two routes down, because that distinction seems to be the entire engine driving this phenomenon. What is the central route?
So the central route is what we all like to believe we use all the time.
Right, the logical, smart part of us.
Exactly. It involves deep critical evaluation. You read the white paper, you analyze the clinical trials, you compare the technical specs side by side, you weigh the historical data.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. It requires massive sustained focus. And biologically speaking, doing that consumes a significant amount of glucose in the brain.
Oh, so it's literally physically draining.
Literally. So to avoid that drain, we have the peripheral route. This is the brain's alternative pathway. It relies almost entirely on superficial contextual cues to make a rapid, low-energy judgment.
Just skimming the surface.
Right. And a recognized authoritative symbol. That is the ultimate peripheral cue.
So when the brain encounters that symbol, it essentially executes a macro, like a computer program.
Yes.
It sees the seal of a national scientific board, and the internal logic just dictates, oh, the institution has already expended the metabolic energy to verify this. I don't have to.
I can safely adopt their conclusion without replicating the labor. That is the exact mechanism.
Wow.
The transfer principle is highly effective because it satisfies the consumer's need for security while simultaneously relieving them of the burden of rigorous evaluation.
So the trust we have historically placed in the institution literally bleeds over to the adjacent product, credibility by osmosis.
Exactly.
And this concept of cognitive conservation brings us directly to a really fascinating part of the source material. It explores this idea of human inertia.
Oh yeah, this is a great concept.
The author explicitly links the effectiveness of transfer to this inertia, which is essentially described as a behavioral default toward the path of least cognitive resistance.
Being lazy.
Right, laziness.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers actively utilize endorsements as a justification to avoid conducting their own independent research.
Which is an entirely rational survival strategy when you actually consider the modern information environment we live in.
How so?
Well, the text quotes Thomas Edison. He said, "There is no expedient to which a man will not go to avoid the labor of thinking."
That's a great quote. A bit cynical maybe, but great.
It sounds like a critique of human laziness, right? But in the context of consumer psychology, it's really just an acknowledgement of cognitive load limit.
Right, we can only process so much.
Right. We make thousands of micro decisions daily. What to eat, what to wear, what route to drive. If we utilize the central route for every single claim presented to us, we would experience total cognitive paralysis by 9:00 a.m.
We wouldn't even make it out of the house.
Exactly.
The text provides a remarkably clear example of this dynamic, and it uses a political referendum to show it.
The crime bill example.
Yes, the crime bill. So imagine you receive a direct mailer detailing a new, sprawling, highly complex crime bill.
Okay.
It has massive fiscal implications, really nuanced legal changes, and wildly differing opinions on its long-term societal impact.
Right. It's a dense piece of legislation. For the average citizen, properly evaluating that bill would require days, maybe weeks of specialized reading.
Not to mention a law degree.
Right. It is a massive cognitive undertaking that most people simply do not have the time, the energy, or the expertise to execute.
But right at the top of the mailer, there is a prominent endorsement from the Fraternal Order of Police urging a yes vote.
And that visual cue instantly resolves the cognitive crisis.
Just like that.
Just like that. The voter doesn't need to understand the nuances of the legislation anymore. They substitute the highly complex question, which is the macroeconomic and sociological impact of this bill positive? They replace that with a much simpler peripheral question.
Which is?
Do I trust the police to understand crime?
Wow. And the internal monologue is just instantaneous. It's like the police deal with this reality daily. If they sanction this bill, their expertise is sufficient proxy for my own understanding.
Exactly. And the author notes that this triggers a highly predictable 1-2 sequence.
What's the sequence?
First, the prospect registers the symbol of credible authority.
Okay, they see the FOP logo.
Right. Second, and this is the most important part, the prospect drastically reduces the volume of critical questions they ask about the core argument.
The skepticism just evaporates.
It evaporates because the responsibility of verification has been entirely outsourced to the perceived authority figure.
Outsourcing the critical thinking, that is so powerful. If you are designing a campaign right now, the implication of this is just profound.
It changes everything.
You cannot treat your customers' attention as an infinite resource. If you present them with a dense matrix of technical specs and just expect them to do the heavy lifting of figuring out why it matters, you will trigger that cognitive inertia and they will abandon the process.
They'll just close the tab.
They will bounce. You must provide a trusted heuristic. You have to give them a sanctioned, authoritative signal that grants them the psychological permission to stop analyzing and simply feel confident in moving forward.
It fundamentally changes the dynamic of the pitch. You're moving it from a demand for their cognitive labor to an offering of cognitive relief.
Here, let me make this easy for you.
Exactly.
But the source material takes this a step further, and this is where the psychology becomes even more layered.
Oh, the character transfer.
Yes. Transfer is not strictly limited to institutional badges or faceless organizations like the police or a medical board. The text dives into celebrity and character transfer.
Right.
This explores how authority, and more specifically emotional resonance, is siphoned from famous individuals or highly crafted personas.
Which is fascinating because this shifts the mechanism from purely authoritative trust to what we would categorize as aspirational or associative trust.
How is that different?
Well, we are no longer just borrowing the cold empirical validation of, say, a medical board. We are borrowing the visceral emotional relationship the public has with a specific human being.
Okay. And the text highlights two distinct case studies here that really drive this home. The first is Proactive, the acne treatment brand, and their deployment of Jessica Simpson as a spokesperson.
A classic campaign.
Totally. Now, the market is completely saturated with dermatological solutions, but Proactive dominated by using her image. And it's fascinating because the peripheral route is operating on a completely different axis here.
It is. If we analyze the semiotics of that specific transfer, the target demographic, teenagers dealing with skin issues, is primarily driven by social anxiety and a desire for peer acceptance.
Right. It's not about the chemical breakdown of the face wash.
Not at all. Jessica Simpson, at the height of her cultural relevance, did not represent dermatological science.
She wasn't in a lab coat.
No. She represented the ultimate mitigation of that specific social anxiety. She embodied visible perfection, social dominance, and confidence.
So the logic bypasses efficacy entirely. The subconscious mapping isn't, this celebrity understands the mechanism of benzoyl peroxide.
Right. Nobody thinks she formulated it.
The mapping is, this celebrity possesses the social status I desperately desire. This product is intimately associated with her. Therefore, consuming this product transfers a fraction of that social status and confidence to me.
It is a purely emotional equation.
Pure emotion.
Exactly. It leverages what psychologists call the consumer's self-discrepancy. It's the gap between their actual self and their ideal self. And the brand positions the celebrity transfer as the bridge across that gap.
That is brilliant. But the second case study in the text is, I think, far more intense.
Oh, the oatmeal war.
Yes, the oatmeal war, because it involves a direct collision between these two different types of transfer. Institutional authority versus character authority. It's the Quaker Oats crisis of 1990.
Such a great case study.
Let's look at the board here. Quaker Oats has been a dominant force for over a century, heavily relying on the narrative that oats reduce cholesterol.
Right, that was their whole thing.
That was their cornerstone claim. Then the New England Journal of Medicine, which is arguably the apex predator of medical authority, publishes the Sachs study, which empirically disputes that core health claim.
Right, they basically say, no, it doesn't.
Exactly. From a corporate strategy perspective, this is an existential threat. You have a supreme central route authority utilizing rigorous clinical data to invalidate your primary value proposition in the public square.
It's a nightmare scenario for a brand.
Absolute nightmare. And the standard corporate reflex in that era would be to fight fire with fire, right?
Yeah, to mobilize a counter squad of credentialed scientists, publish conflicting data, and just engage in a massive war of attrition over the empirical facts.
Our scientists say your scientists are wrong.
Yeah.
But Quaker Oats did not do that. They bypassed the scientific battlefield entirely and deployed the actor Wilford Brimley.
A legendary move.
I look at this strategic maneuver and it is staggering. It's like trying to counter a tactical nuclear strike with a homemade apple pie and the pie actually winning.
That is a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And the asymmetrical nature of that response is exactly why it was so effective.
Why did it work so well?
To understand the psychology here, we have to look at frameworks like the stereotype content model.
Okay, break that down for us.
This model suggests that human beings judge others on two primary dimensions. Competence and warmth.
Competence and warmth, okay.
Right. So the New England Journal of Medicine represents maximum competence, but absolute zero warmth.
It's just cold clinical data.
Cold, clinical, and detached. And Brimley. He represents maximum warmth.
Oh, man. He really did. The author specifically points out his high credibility demeanor. He was cast because he resonated as this no-nonsense, deeply honest, traditional grandfather figure.
Right. He wasn't wearing a lab coat. He was usually sitting in a cozy kitchen or on a porch.
Eating a bowl of oatmeal.
Exactly. He fundamentally altered the epistemology of the debate.
How so?
He shifted the criteria for truth from what does the clinical data say to what does common sense and traditional wisdom tell us.
Wow, so when Brimley looked into the camera and firmly suggested eating oatmeal was simply the right thing to do, he was appealing entirely to a non-critical, deeply emotional style of thinking.
He didn't argue with the journal at all.
No.
He just rendered the journal emotionally irrelevant.
That is so wild. The persona transferred a profound sense of safety, nostalgia, and generational honesty directly to the product.
And it worked.
It really worked. The text explicitly notes that this campaign arrested a 5-year sales decline. It's an incredible testament to the fact that when forced to choose between the cold logic of an institutional study and the warm reassurance of a trusted archetype, the consumer's brain will often let the emotion do all the heavy lifting.
It proves that emotional resonance can effectively neutralize empirical data, as long as the persona delivering the emotion perfectly matches the psychological deficit of the audience.
The psychological deficit, that's a key phrase.
Yes, because the consumers felt threatened and confused by the shifting medical advice. Should I eat this? Should I not? Brimley provided absolute, unwavering certainty.
So if you are looking at your own messaging, the critical question here is, what is the specific emotional deficit your target audience is experiencing?
That's the million-dollar question.
Are they overwhelmed and craving simplicity? Are they feeling inadequate and seeking aspiration, like the proactive example?
Right.
The voice or face you align with your brand must be a precision instrument designed to project that exact missing emotional nutrient. You have to find your equivalent of Wilford Brimley, an entity whose mere presence stabilizes the consumer's specific anxiety.
And we really must recognize that this transfer operates almost entirely below the threshold of conscious awareness.
Like, people aren't logically parsing this out.
No, the consumer rarely articulates, "I'm trusting this actor," over a medical journal. They simply report feeling better, safer, and more confident in the product.
The subjective feeling of safety is the metric of a successful transfer.
Exactly.
This brings us to the final and perhaps the most complex dimension explored in the source material, fabricating authority.
Oh, this is where it gets a little spicy.
Very spicy. What the text calls the official-looking transfer. So far, we have discussed globally recognized scientific bodies and massive cultural celebrities.
Right, heavy hitters.
But the vast majority of commerce is conducted by small to medium enterprises. They don't possess the capital for a celebrity endorsement, nor the time to secure a federal sanction.
Most people can't afford Jessica Simpson.
Right. So what do?
This forces us to look at the absolute minimum threshold required to trigger that peripheral route we talked about earlier.
Lazy route.
The lazy route, yes. Because the brain is utilizing a heuristic, a rapid pattern matching system, it doesn't necessarily require the actual verified presence of authority.
Wait, really?
Really, it often only requires the aesthetic markers of authority.
The aesthetic markers, like it just has to look real.
Yes. The brain checks the visual cue against its internal database of what authority usually looks like.
The text provides an example that perfectly isolates this phenomenon. The author describes a client of his, a professional hypnotist, who is trying to scale their practice.
Yes, the hypnotist mailer.
Yeah. On their promotional direct mailers, they prominently featured the logo of the National Guild of Hypnotists. Now, the author concedes a crucial point here. Functionally, 0 prospects in the target market had ever heard of this specific guild.
Nobody knows what that is?
Nobody. Yet, its inclusion dramatically improved the perception of the business.
Let's deconstruct the semiotics of that logo, right?
Please do.
The brain processes the word national, which instantly implies a broad, standardized, highly regulated scope.
Okay, it sounds official.
Then it processes the word guild, which carries centuries of historical weight. It implies mastery, peer review, exclusivity.
Right, like medieval stonemasons or something.
Exactly. And the visual design of the seal likely utilized traditional fonts and imagery associated with academia or government.
So the consumer's brain absorbs those visual data points and instantly synthesizes a conclusion.
Which is?
This practitioner belongs to an established governing body. They are vetted. They are safe. The peripheral route fires perfectly. even though the central route, if it were actually engaged, would reveal that the consumer has no idea what the organization actually requires for membership.
For all they know, you just pay $50 and get the logo.
Exactly. But the symbol performs the heavy lifting entirely on its own.
The author also references some historical observations from the Institute for Propaganda Analysis regarding the classic man in the white coat trope.
Oh, I love this one. We see this everywhere.
We are incredibly familiar with this visual shorthand, merely placing a dignified-looking actor in clinical attire, perhaps in a setting that implies a laboratory.
Maybe some beakers in the background.
Exactly, and having them present basic statistical data generates instant credibility for the product.
Okay, let's interrogate this because there is a massive cognitive dissonance here.
Okay, go for it.
The text and historical advertising records show that before regulations strictly prohibited it, companies would literally hire soap opera actors, actors who were famous for playing fictional doctors on television, to put on their costumes and sell aspirin in commercials.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Exactly. And the viewers knew they were actors. They watched them read scripts on a fictional set 5 days a week.
Right, it wasn't a secret.
So why does the peripheral route still fire when the conscious mind knows, with absolute certainty, that the visual cue is a performance? How does the brain fail to override that?
It is a profound demonstration of the speed and power of visual processing versus conscious contextualization.
Break that down.
The visual system processes the white coat, the stethoscope, and the clinical environment in milliseconds.
Milliseconds.
Right, and that imagery is deeply, inextricably wired to feelings of deference, safety, and medical authority due to our lifelong socialization. The conscious realization, oh, that's the actor from the daytime drama, happens slightly later, and it operates on a completely different cognitive track.
So the feeling beats the logic to the punch.
Exactly. The initial visceral feeling of trust has already been generated. The aesthetic of authority successfully hijacks the physiological response before the logical brain can even veto it.
That is terrifyingly effective, which naturally leads us into a pretty major philosophical and practical debate about the boundaries of this principle.
The ethics of it all.
Right. If the peripheral route can be engaged by an actor in a costume or a guild that nobody's ever heard of, where is the line between strategic marketing and outright deception?
That's a very fine line.
If we are explicitly bypassing the critical faculties of the consumer using synthesized cues, aren't we just discussing the mechanics of manipulation?
That tension right there is the central axis upon which modern marketing ethics rotates.
How does the source material handle it?
Well, the source material navigates this by establishing a firm baseline regarding the integrity of the underlying product. The ethical demarcation line is defined by the actual utility delivered to the consumer. If an entity uses the aesthetic of medical authority to peddle a scientifically baseless, harmful substance, that is unambiguous fraud.
Obviously.
The visual shortcut is being used to bypass the defenses to extract resources maliciously.
Right. If the mansion is actually a toxic waste dump, putting a beautiful paved road in front of it is a hostile act.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. However, the author operates on the assumption that the product genuinely fulfills its promises.
Okay, let's go back to the hypnotist.
Good example. Let's assume the practitioner is highly skilled and possesses a legitimate methodology for helping individuals quit smoking or manage anxiety.
So the service works?
It works. But they are still faced with the paralyzing inertia of the consumer. The prospect is suffering, but they are terrified of the vulnerability required to seek help from a complete stranger.
So the belief gap is functioning as a barrier to their own improvement.
Yes. In that scenario, utilizing the official-looking transfer, the guild logo, the professional typography, the authoritative posture, it serves as a psychological lubricant.
Lubricant.
Yes, it provides the necessary aesthetic reassurances that allow the frightened consumer to bypass their own irrational inertia.
It gets them in the door.
The visual cue gets them through the door, so the genuine value of the service can actually be administered. The peripheral route is engaged not to deceive, but to facilitate a beneficial transaction that the consumer's hyperactive threat detection system was previously blocking.
It is an incredibly nuanced distinction. You are utilizing the aesthetic language of authority to reduce the friction of consumption for a product that inherently warrants consumption.
Exactly. You're just removing the roadblocks.
So the actionable translation for you, the listener, is to aggressively audit the visual and tonal signals your business is broadcasting.
What do you look like to a stranger?
Exactly. You cannot afford to be functionally brilliant but aesthetically amateur. You must adopt the visual vernacular of authority in your specific domain.
Whatever that looks like for your field.
Whether that means securing legitimate certifications and displaying them prominently, upgrading the typographic quality of your materials, or ensuring your physical presentation mirrors the established archetypes of your industry.
You have to look the part.
You must ensure that when the consumer's brain inevitably uses the peripheral route to scan your offering, it instantly recognizes the pattern of safety and competence.
Because it will scan you. That's a guarantee.
Do not demand that they read the fine print to discover your value. Make your legitimacy visually undeniable from the first millisecond of contact.
Because the aesthetic presentation is not just packaging, it is the primary interface through which trust is negotiated.
That is so well said. Let's synthesize the disparate threads of this deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. We have analyzed the evolutionary roots of the belief gap, the metabolic efficiency of cognitive shortcuts, the emotional asymmetry of character endorsements like Wilford Brimley, and the powerful semiotics of visual authority. The unifying thesis of principle number 3 is that trust is not a static property that you must slowly, painfully generate from absolute zero for every new endeavor.
No, trust is a highly liquid asset.
A liquid asset. I love that.
It really is. It is a transferable currency that already exists in vast reservoirs within established institutions, cultural archetypes, and recognized symbols.
The fundamental mandate of credibility by osmosis is to actively position your work in the direct flow of that currency.
You have to tap into the stream.
By intentionally engineering proximity between your product and the established markers of authority, you relieve the consumer of the exhausting biological tax of critical analysis. You construct a psychological environment where the safest, easiest, and most comfortable cognitive path is to simply believe you.
And when you eliminate the friction of skepticism, you unlock the actual value of your offering.
We have spent this entire discussion examining how we borrow authority from above.
Right, vertical authority.
Exactly, from the institutions, the experts, and the towering figures that society has conditioned us to revere. But authority is only one vector of influence.
There's another one.
What happens to our cognitive defenses when the pressure doesn't come from a presumed superior, but from our own peers?
Oh, this is a fun topic.
What occurs when the primary driver of a decision isn't a white coat or a corporate seal, but the overwhelming instinctual terror of being left out of the tribe?
FOMO.
FOMO. Next time, we will explore principle number 4, the bandwagon effect. We will analyze why horizontal social proof often overrides vertical authority and how the ancient human survival mechanism of group conformity shapes modern market dynamics.
Can't wait for that one.
It's going to be great. Until then, I want to leave you with a thought regarding the future of the concepts we just discussed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We know that the peripheral route relies heavily on the rapid processing of visual markers, right?
The white coat, the official-looking crest, the familiar face.
Exactly. But we are rapidly entering an era where generative AI and deepfake technology can perfectly synthesize those exact visual cues at zero cost.
Oh, wow, yeah.
When the aesthetic of authority can be flawlessly fabricated by anyone, anywhere, how will the human brain's threat detection system adapt?
That is a terrifying question.
Right. If seeing the symbol is no longer a reliable shortcut to truth, will we be forced back to the exhausting labor of the central route, or will we develop an entirely new kind of peripheral vision? Think about that the next time you find yourself trusting a screen. We will see you next time.